One, and we should be live, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Agenda item 1. Good afternoon and welcome to this District Planning Committee meeting on Thursday, the 9th of July 2020. My name is Councillor Bob Boyce and I am the chairman of this committee. This remote meeting is held under new regulations which came into effect on the 4th of April in response to the COVID-19 situation. There are a few housekeeping issues to run through, including our new working practices which have been implemented due to the pandemic and the etiquette for this meeting. First of all, please could I ask everyone present in this meeting to ensure your microphone remains muted and your video feed off when not addressing the committee. This will reduce background noises and avoid any unintentional disturbances. This meeting will be hosted remotely via conferencing software, which allows members of the public to virtually attend the meeting, whilst being able to protect themselves and others and observe the government's lockdown measures. We may encounter some glitches this afternoon, so I hope that everyone will bear with us as we get used to this new way of working. We are streaming this meeting live as well as recording, and by being present in the meeting, you are giving your consent to being recorded. Members and officers, during each item, please use the chat function of the meeting to indicate if you wish to speak. I will then invite you at the appropriate time. Members are reminded that apart from indicating you wish to speak or that you have to leave the meeting, the chat function should not be used for any other purpose. The process this afternoon will obviously be different, and for some items I may invite each member to speak in turn. Therefore, I would encourage all members to keep your contribution as clear and concise as possible, please. When speaking and referring to the agenda papers, please ensure you reference a page or paragraph number. Could I ensure that everyone is directly connected to a power supply so that nobody drops out due to short battery life? And last, if members need to leave this meeting at any point, please make this known and use the chat function to signify that you need to leave the meeting. Now I'll ask officers that are present to introduce themselves, starting with Matt Lee.
Good afternoon, members and members of the public. I'm Matthew Lee and I'm Lead Specialist Place at Malden District Council.
Mr. Johnson.
Good afternoon, members. Michael Johnson, Lead Specialist Development.
You're very distant.
My apologies, Councillor. Good evening, good afternoon, councillors. My name is Michael Johnson, Lead Specialist Development Management. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members. I'm Devon Herner and a specialist in development management.
Ms. Matthews.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon. I'm Catherine Matthews, a specialist in development management.
And Tara, yourself, and any other officers that are present.
Good afternoon, Chairman. I'm Tara Bird, Committee Services Officer for the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else present, Tara? Officers?
Not that I'm aware of, Chairman, no.
I'm getting lots of messages of people losing connection. Right, now Tara, will you please call the roll of members to confirm who is in attendance? Thank you.
Yes, Chairman. Members, usual, if we call you alphabetically, just confirm you're here, please. Starting with Councillor Bamford.
Yes, present, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Bassinger.
Good afternoon. Yes, present, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Miss Beale.
Present.
Thank you, Councillor Beale. Councillor Brian Beale. Bell.
Here, Tara.
Mrs. Channer.
Present at the moment, Tara.
Councillor Dewick.
Apologies for absence.
Thank you very much. Councillor Durham.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Fleming.
Present.
Councillor Fluker. I believe he was on, Chairman, but
Present. Sorry, I've got a connectivity problem.
thank you. Councillor Harker.
Present.
Councillor Hurd.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Helm.
Present.
Councillor Hull.
Present.
Councillor Jarvis.
Present, thanks, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Lagan.
Present, thanks, Tara.
Councillor Mays.
Present.
Councillor Morley.
Present, Tara, but voice only, saving the internet with the video. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Morris.
Good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Nunn.
Present, Tara.
Councillor Mrs Shaughnessy.
Present, Tara. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Skeens.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Councillor Stamp.
Present, Tara, but I'm on the iPad, so I may have trouble communicating, Tara, today, so I do apologise.
Okay, noted. Thank you. Councillor Stilts.
Present, Tara.
Councillor Swain.
Yes, present.
Councillor Mrs Thompson. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
Sorry, I'm here.
Thank you. And Councillor Miss White.
Present.
Very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Tara. Apologies.
Yes, Chairman, apologies we received from Councillor Keys.
Back up again unless.
Thank you. And Councillor Dewick, we hear.
And Councillor Dewick, yes, sorry.
Right, we now go on to agenda item 3, minutes of the last meeting.
We need somebody to turn off their microphone. It's not
It's, it's Maddie Thompson and Clive Morley. They're together again.
Can we stop the inter-chat? The minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of June 2020, found on pages 7 to 12, are approved as a true and accurate record, and I so move. Is that seconded?
Yeah, great. Seconded. Agreed.
Is there agreement with this?
Yes.
Agreed.
Thank you. That's the agenda item 3. Now, agenda item 4, declarations of interest. To disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest relating to items of business on the agenda, having regard to paragraphs 6 to 8, inclusive of the Code of Conduct for members. And members are reminded that they are also required to disclose any such interest as soon as they become aware, should the need arise throughout the meeting. If any member has an interest to declare, please use the chat function and indicate, and I will invite you to speak. Now, I've probably got several now. So I know Councillor Mays wishes to declare an interest.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, a non-pecuniary interest in item 5, as I know the owner of Knowles Farm, and in item 6, as I am part of the Bradwell working group. Thank you.
And I know Mrs. Channer. Mrs. Channer.
Sorry, Chairman, I'm having a bit of difficulty there. Couldn't get my chat to register. On both, Chairman, I'm going to declare. Obviously, the first one, the planning application, Essex County Council, because of obviously they're consulted on matters, and obviously the Relief Road and areas like that. And also on the Bradwell, obviously I'll declare I'm an Essex County Councillor, and obviously they're involved in the JMBB with Malden. I don't sit on it, but I am aware obviously that there's some joint working or boards between Essex to do with Bradwell.
I'm having a job. Thank you, Mrs. Channer. Councillor Durham. I'm having a job to keep up with it. Everybody seems to be declaring an interest.
You're doing a jolly
Councillor
good,
Durham.
you're doing a jolly good job, Chairman. Chairman, I have a non-pecuniary interest in today's meeting as a member of Essex County Council. I'm also Deputy Cabinet Member for Economic Development, which includes planning, and I am a member of the JMB, the Joint Members Bradwell Board, which is a joint board between Malden District Council and Essex County Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor,
I think I've got to say non-pecuniary.
Yes, Chairman. I'm as Chairman agenda item 6, as Chairman of the Bradwell B working group and a member of JMB. I will leave the meeting at the end of agenda item 5.
Councillor Fluker.
Sorry, Chairman. Yeah, agenda item 6. I'm a member of the JMBB and a member of the Bradwell B working group, non-pecuniary. Thank you.
I have Councillor Skeens and Bassinger.
Yes, I'm a member of the Bradwell B working group and non-pecuniary interest.
Bassinger.
Agenda item 6, the same as Councillor Skeens. I'm a member of the Bradwell B working group. Non-pecuniary.
Thank you. Councillor Lagan.
Thank you, Chair. Just to be on the safe side, I've had some conversations with some local groups who object to the proposed work. Non-pecuniary. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Thompson and White. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I've got some feedback. Sorry, everyone else is, so I think I'd better. I wasn't aware it was an interest really, but I am a member of JMBB and the Bradwell B working group, although they're actually not directly related to this application, but non-pecuniary anyway. Thank you.
Councillor White.
Going on.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to say that, like all the others, I sit on the JMBB and the Bradwell Working Group, and I don't think it's an interest, but everybody seems noting it, so I will note it. So yeah, we can put it down as a non-pecuniary interest, but I will vote on this matter.
Thank you. Councillor Helm.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a member of the Bradwell Working Group. Thank you. Non-pecuniary.
Tara, is there anybody else?
No, Chairman, I believe that is everybody that's registered on the chat. They wish to speak.
Right. I wish to declare an interest in that, although I agree with nuclear power in principle, and for reasons that are probably not planning reasons, I have concerns about agenda item 6. So I will be abstaining in that vote for my personal vote. Right. Thank you. We can now go on to agenda item 5, which is land north west of Knowles Farm, Wick Hill, Malden. Found on pages 13 to 134. Please note that a member update in relation to this application has been also circulated prior to the meeting, contained on pages 3 to 6. Can I call upon Miss Matthews, please, to present the report?
Thank you, Chairman. I think I've shared my screen. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, so this is an outline planning application for mixed development consisting 320 or up to 320 new homes, employment land, community uses, and a new relief road and ancillary developments on land north and west of Knowles Farm in Malden. That drawing there shows the location and extent of the application site. So this site is site 2B on the next plan, and that forms part of the South Malden Garden suburb. So site 2A is the eastern and western parcels. 2A is currently being built out by Taylor Wimpey. on the east. On the west, that's Crest Nicholson has bought that site, and site 2C is Linden Homes development, which has now been completed. So this site forms part of the strategic master plan for the South Morden Garden suburb, and the area of the site that the current application is pointed to on that drawing. The application is accompanied by a number of drawings, indicative drawings. So this is an indicative phasing plan suggesting that the site could develop out in 4 phases. We've got a land use parameter plan. So the yellow land is residential. We've got some blue crosshatch land, which is the employment land, and then sort of purpley coloured crosshatch land on the north there, which is the community land. So the this is another parameter plan, access and movement plan. So you've got the possible location of the South Morden Relief Road in grey. Landscape parameter plan. Building story heights would all be set as part of the application. So the darker colour is the higher, the greater building heights, and then the going down to the lighter blue being the single story. Residential density parameter plan, again, that would be set. The higher density, the darker purple colour, and the lower density, the lighter purple colour. The application had an illustrative master plan, and then some highways drawings submitted with the application. So this is the roundabout that exists outside the Linden Homes site, and there's some photos of that roundabout if that helps. And then there will be another roundabout. This would form part of the Relief Road, which will go off to the north outside Limehouse Farm. And then there'll be another junction with the Relief Road onto Wick Hill, north of Knowles Farm. So some photos of the site, maybe just fields currently. Okay, so the purpose of the report for members' consideration today is as an update of the report that was considered in March 2017. So in March 2017, there was a resolution to grant plan permission for the same development, the subject of members' deliberation today, subject to 106 and subject to conditions, because that 106 has never been signed. Because of for ongoing discussions between the County Council Highways and the applicants, the planning permission has not been granted. So the purpose of the report today, as I said, is to update members on planning issues that have arisen since March 2017. So a very brief summary, which we're all set out in the report. So the MPPF has been revised since 2017. The local plan has now been approved and adopted. The modern design guides have been adopted as a SPG. We've got a new vehicle parking standards adopted. The 5-year housing land supply for the district has been maintained. There's updates to the relevant planning history for the site and the neighbouring sites. Advice has been received from Natural England regarding the Essex Coast Recreational Disturbance Avoidance and Mitigation Strategy, more commonly known as RAMS. Ecology, we felt that this could be dealt with by conditions. And the South Morden Relief Road, at the time of the last committee, it was envisaged that the applicant would be constructing the Relief Road. But since that time, it has been decided it would be much more easier and make more sense if the county council actually built the road, so they would pool the financial contributions and then construct the relief road on the applicant's land. In terms of air quality and noise, they felt that any changes relating to that could be dealt with by conditions. The overall summary, so we've got an application for up to 320 houses, including affordable housing. There's an element of employment land, and we've got an element of community uses, open space, pedestrian and cycle links to the South Morden Garden suburb and the wider area. There'll be contributions towards strategic infrastructure, including education, early years, the relief road, off-site highway improvements, public transport, youth facilities, play provision, health allotments, and RAMs. This is a final site in the South Morden Garden suburb. The other two sites have now been approved. And there is another site, the Linden Home site, which has been approved and built out. And this facilitates the delivery of the relief road. The site is allocated for a minimum of 300 units in the LDP. The site will make a strategic contribution to the council's 5-year housing land supply, and the application is consistent with the requirements of the MPPF, the local development plan, and the infrastructure delivery plan, which forms part of the local plan, as well as the principles of the strategic master plan framework submitted as part. Yeah. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. I believe the leader wishes to ask a point of clarification. Leader.
Thank you, Chairman. I speak actually as the ward member for Southminster at these meetings. Can the officer confirm that Essex County Council are legally obliged through the 106 agreement to deliver and build the South Morden Relief Road?
Ms. Matthews.
Thank you, Chairman. The 106 will require a financial contribution from the developer towards the construction of the relief road, and as I said before, that contribution, along with the others that have already been secured, would be pooled together and used by the county council to build the relief road. But there would not be any time frame within time frame within the 106 for that to, or any obligation on the county council to deliver the relief road by any particular time. But they are working with the Morden Council to deliver the relief road in accordance with the infrastructure delivery plan, which has already been agreed and does form part of the local development plan.
Thank you. Right, now under the council's public participation, we have received one submission in line with the public participation scheme. Having reviewed the submission, I will now ask Mr. Johnson to read it out. Mr. Johnson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This submission is from Nicholas Mann, the applicant. I make this statement as the Managing Director of Dartmouth Park Estates, the applicant, who has promoted the Wick Hill North site for housing and associated development for more than a decade. From the outset, we fully engaged in both the preparation of your council's local plan and strategic master plan framework, leading to the site being allocated for a minimum of 300 homes as one of 3 strategic allocations that make up the South Morden Garden suburb. In March 2017, your council resolved to grant planning permission for our outline planning application for up to 320 homes, businesses and community uses, and the South Morden Relief Road. We have been discussing the Section 106 with both your council and Essex County Council since, mainly on the terms for the construction and delivery of the relief road, but also the 30% affordable housing and other obligations proposed in 2017. All the obligations agreed then are before you today, plus the more recent RAMS contribution requirement. This includes both providing land within the site to accommodate the road and its junctions, and a financial contribution towards its construction, which Essex County Council Highways intend to do by 2028. The delivery of all 320 homes prior to the relief road and that Essex County Councils can construct the road under a single subsequent highways contract, unlocks the delivery of housing and other development and infrastructure at the site. I am talking with potential house builders for the new health hub. Also, assuming an approval today and outline permission in August, our programme envisages development commencing in 2022, with the first 60 dwellings being delivered in 2023/24 and the remaining homes delivered thereafter, as reflected in your council's 5-year housing land supply. I look forward to continuing to work with your council and Essex County Council to release the plan-led shared vision to providing beautiful new homes, a relief road, community use and business development within a vibrant and distinctive new neighbourhood within the South Malden Garden suburb. I therefore welcome your officer's conditional recommendation, which I trust the committee will endorse. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Chairman.
Right. Thank you. Now, I'm going to move this recommendation. Is that seconded?
I'll second it. Seconded.
Yeah. Thank you. Right. Now, I have a list of speakers, I think starting with Councillor Mays. Councillor Mays.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I've only got a couple of questions at this point. What percentage of the overall houses are going to be affordable is one question. And what happens if there is insufficient money in the pot from the 106 to actually fund this road that would be desperately needed for this particular development? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm reminded that I should remind members that there is an amendment to conditions and informatives detailed on the members' update. Thank you, Councillor Mays. Ms Matthews, do you want to answer the question about the affordable housing at this stage?
Yes, Chairman, the affordable housing requirement would be 30%, which is policy compliant, and the housing section of the Malden Council are raised no objections to the application on that basis. And in terms of what happens if there isn't enough money in the pot for the relief road, then that money, no, there would need to be money found from other sources. There is a potential source of extra funding from the North Heybridge developments, which is being investigated, but that is a matter that will need to be ironed out subsequent to any plan permission being granted, and once it's established exactly how much the road will cost to build, because there may well be enough money in the pot, but when it's been established exactly how much money it will cost to build the road, then the size of the shortfall, if there is any, can then be assessed and alternative means of funding investigated. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Bamford.
Could I come back, Mr. Chairman? Just one quick question.
Please.
Just a supplementary. Thank you. Clearly, there is going to be an issue with the funding. At what point, if any, would the road be put in? I.e., halfway through the whole development, or at the end of the development, or has that not been agreed at this point?
I thought it was a supplementary on, but it's a different question. Miss Matthews.
Sure, Chairman, would you like me to pick that one up?
Yes, please, Mr. Lee.
Members need to be aware that this is an outline planning application, and matters such as phasing and things such that are to be agreed further through conditions or reserved matters. As explained in the report, not as explained in the report, which go back slightly even further, the provision of new dwellings won't automatically require, the first few houses won't automatically require the provision of a road. So there'll be a phasing process that will ensure that as the new the number of new dwellings come forward, it doesn't have a detrimental impact to an acceptable degree on the local highway network. And that's obviously what the point of the relief road is to mitigate that harm. So it won't be in place before the first house is occupied. There will be a phasing plan, and that this could, in theory, stumble and mean that not all of the dwellings could be brought forward. What members need to recall is obviously that when assessing the funding required for the road at the time of the LDP, it was accepted that the worst case scenario level of figure would not be delivered through the LDP sites. This was something the council agreed and accepted as a appropriate risk. The funding that is delivered through this site and the other sites will meet what was seen as a fairly precautionary but not unbelievably precautionary approach and figure. So as Matthew's explained, currently we're looking at, or Essex County Council looking at, facilitating the exact figure. So we don't know the exact figure, and we don't know if there is a shortfall, but it's quite likely there may not be a shortfall as long as it doesn't become a worst case scenario. But as explained, even if it was, that would then mean that all of the dwellings wouldn't come forward. So it should not result in a demonstrable impact on the local highway network, if that makes sense to members. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Thank you. Ms Matthews, will you remove your slide from the screen, please? Thank you very much. It might be useful sometimes to have the slide of the site and what's going on. But at the moment, I've got Mrs. Bamford next. Councillor Bamford.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, delay in getting my microphone and video up. Firstly, I can't see the update. Is that possible to put that on the screen, because I can't access everything on the iPad? Now, I must say I'm a bit confused about this. We have already approved the housing. So in my mind, this is not about the housing. This is about the road, and whether this is going to be whether this will actually happen or not. I can see on page 22 of the report at 5, 10, 12, there are various conditions going forward, which don't seem to form part of the section 106. So my first question is there some kind of formal agreement being drawn up between Essex County Council and Malden District Council with regard to the negotiations over the how this road is going to actually be constructed? Because my reading of this is that there will be no road at all until we have 320 extra houses, although, as Mr. Lee has said, if there is a problem, then we might have to temporarily arrange some kind of other accesses and arrangements. Well, this doesn't appear to me to be very satisfactory. There is also on pages 26 and 27 reference to the strategic phasing plan and highway conditions, and I would query that those have been changed or not, because it seems to me the original strategic phasing plan was that the parts of the road would be constructed as the houses were built. So we're talking about a totally different arrangement now. We already know that the roads in Malden are pretty bad, and as more houses are built, it's going to get worse. So I'm not very happy about agreeing this, Chairman, but I'd like some clarification on those points that I've raised. Thank you.
Ms. Matthews, please.
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of the update that was being asked about, I do have an update, but it doesn't all fit onto one screen. But the update basically was recommended condition number 8 had a formatting issue. Little subsection A wasn't included, so that's just a correction. Condition 42, which relates to ecology. It was being recommended that there was an extra requirement in there to link in with the habitats regulation assessment which is being carried out for the application. And in terms of the informative, again, that was just a correction in terms of referring to the Linden roundabout hasn't been quite finished exactly how the drawings show yet, but that was just a correction rather than anything substantial. So hopefully that answers that question. Let me just stop sharing my screen. There's a question about whether the strategic phasing plan has changed. As part of the application when it was considered in March 2017, there was an indicative strategic phasing plan submitted with the application, but that was always indicative, and it was always intended that the actual phasing plan, as Mr. Lee has mentioned already, was to be approved subsequently, and condition 8 requires that to happen, so that phasing plan would have to be approved by the council and be always submitted to the council either before any reserve matters are submitted or at least at the same time. So it would be that at that point we'd be looking at the phasing and in terms of how the number of houses being built over a period of time and how that links in with the highway network and the infrastructure that's proposed as part of the application. There's a comment about that the residential has already been approved. That it's an allocated site in the local plan, so it has been approved in inverted commas as part of that process. There's a council resolution to grant plan permission for the application, which includes the residential, but the plan permission hasn't been issued as to date, as explained earlier. And in terms about the road, the delivery of the road, and when that would happen, again, as Mr. Lee has said already, that would be a matter that would be dealt with as part of the approval of the details required by condition 8, and that will be based on the most up-to-date traffic information that the county council has, and this, I suppose the other point perhaps worth mentioning is this relief road isn't really for this development, and this development is fairly small in comparison to the South Morden Garden suburb as a whole and the North Heybridge Garden suburb. So in terms of linking it to the delivery of this site, that's not quite accurate, because it's more to do with the much larger numbers of houses elsewhere in the Gardner suburb, and also it's designed to take some of the traffic that the North Garden Heybridge suburb would generate as well. I think that answers the questions, but please come back if not.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews.
Chairman, can I just come back?
About 7 or 8 more people.
Well, one of my questions wasn't actually answered, and that is the on page 22 at 5.10.12. It's about the negotiations between the county council and our council with regard to the road. Is there going to be some kind of legal or agreement to facilitate this? Because it doesn't seem to be in any sort of documentation.
It's in the recommendation, though, I think.
Yes, but it's not a formal document between us and the Essex County Council. That's what I wanted to know.
Mr. Lee.
Chairman, as 5.10.12 goes on to explain, we will deal with it through the section 106, which is a legally binding document. The heads of terms within the officer's report, and the exact wording will be well sorted out between the lawyers, as in with all section 106 agreements. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, now I've got Mrs. Shaughnessy next, followed by the other ward member, I think, Councillor Hurd, and then I've got about 6 more members that wish to speak. Councillor Shaughnessy.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Could I please first register a non-pecuniary interest, as I know one of the people, one of the locals who are against this. I don't think my message got through originally, so I would just like to register a non-pecuniary there. Thank you. And yes, it is mine and Councillor Hurd's ward, Chairman, as you mentioned. My personal opinion is that this proposal has not really been well thought out. A positive that I have picked out about it is that all the trees and hedges are to remain, which I think is great. And one of my questions will be, will this be monitored, please? Thank you. And I have 2 quite specific issues here, Chairman. Thank you. Now, it says in the text, I believe it's in 5.6, it says that consider the amenity of neighbouring properties. So I'd just like to bring that to people's attention. And then I would like to say there is already a natural bridleway going right across the site past the residence known as Wincroft. And this bridleway goes right through to the 414. So why is this not being used instead of the proposed more dangerous bridleway on the Wick Hills sort of section of it? And why are 3-storey buildings proposed right next to Wincroft? This seems very unfair, and they are squeezed in between this residence and the potential relief road. One of these buildings even curving, if anyone cares to look at the map, right towards the boundary of Wincroft. This does seem very unfair, as there is plenty of space in the rest of the development for these higher buildings. And where is the 6-metre buffer here as well? And I have 3 questions for the officers. Thank you, Chairman. Will there be boundary planting for current residences along Wick Hill? And what about earth banks? Is that a possibility to reduce traffic noise from the 414? And when the relief road is ever built, will there be provision also for a horse crossing from Linebrook Farm to the bridleway, because the Linden roundabout impedes their view at the moment? So I'd like to ask those questions, Chairman. Thank you.
Mrs. Shaughnessy, you asked those 3 questions, but I believe you also asked probably 2 or 3 more questions in your speech. But Miss Matthews, will you pick up on all the points that Mrs. Shaughnessy has brought up?
Thank you, Chairman.
I'll try to, yes. There was, I think the first question I picked up was would the retention of existing vegetation be monitored?
Yes, thank you.
Again, and that is probably a response to some of the other questions that are asked. In terms of in terms of details like that, there are conditions recommended. There will be a landscaping condition and information and details about where the existing landscaping, proposed landscaping, and how that would be maintained and retained for the future. If the development wasn't carried out in accordance with those details, it will be dealt with in the normal way through our enforcement officers. And I think the next question was about the bridleway and why we're not using the existing bridleway through the site. I'm just having a look back at the access and movement plan, which shows. I can share my screen. I think that one's access and movement plan. So that has got a bridleway, which is the orange dotted line. Yeah. So that's the bridleway that partly existing, partly proposed through the site, and that's what's been that was submitted as part of the original application, and that was part of the resolution to grant plan permission for the development back in March 2017. So that hasn't changed. And in terms of buffers and possible earth banks and 3-story buildings being close to existing residents, again, these parameter plans, we've got a story height parameter plan that is, again, it's a very broad brush parameter plan. So the details in terms of exactly where those 3-story buildings would go, and it's up to 3 stories. It doesn't necessarily mean that they would all be 3 stories. They would come forward as part of any reserve matters application and be assessed. And by approving the application today is not agreeing to 3-story houses or buildings being right up close to existing residents. The normal material considerations would be assessed as part of any reserve matters application, and that would include impact on existing residents in terms of overlooking and dominance and all the other potential effects that the new development would have, and again, the landscaping and any landscape screening that might be felt to be required, again, that would come through and be assessed and dealt with as part of the reserve matters applications. There was a question about crossing for horses across the A414. That isn't part of the proposal, and that hasn't been something that the County Council as Highways Authority have asked for or asked to be included within the Section 106 agreement. So provision hasn't been made for that, and it would be arguable that at this very late stage in the application process, it would be unreasonable to add that to the list of things that the developer is expected to provide as part of the development. But to my knowledge, that's the first time that issue has been raised. I think that covers all the questions that were asked. But
thank you. Thank you, Councillor Swain.
May I have a quick supplementary, please, Chairman?
I have got loads of. Go on, Mrs. Shaughnessy.
Thank you so much. I still am not happy about the bridleway, the part of the bridleway going on to Wick Hill. I really don't know why the original one isn't used and why it still can't be used, and moving some of these higher properties. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Swain.
Thank you, Chairman. I thought you were calling Councillor Hurd first.
Sorry, you're right. Councillor Hurd. Thank you, Councillor Swain.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Swain. Chairman, when this was initially passed in 2017, the applicant was building the road. Now, why are Essex County Council taking it on? That's my first question. What is the developer's contribution? And what is the overall cost? I can't believe that we don't know how much it costs to build a road going from A to B. Are we expecting the development to be built before we have this road? It must be built. It speaks of being a relief road, and that's exactly what it should be. It seems to me that Section 106 monies are coming in from all over the place. And to suggest that we take the North Heybridge 106 contributions to subsidise a South Malden suburb seems to me rather odd, because North Heybridge is going to want all the money that it can to deal with the problems that there are there. So I would like clarification on those, please.
Councillor Hurd, my understanding is that the county are unable to put a figure on what the cost is, but this is a question perhaps for Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee? Are you still with us, Mr. Lee?
I can answer.
All right, okay. Sorry, Miss Matthews.
No, that's fine. No. So the first question was why the county council and not the applicant. It was due to a funding issue, was my understanding. The relief road was going to be on the applicant's land, but the funding was mostly from other developers, and also the contributions may have been received from the developers after the relief road was actually needed, as the payments are linked with the number of houses built on the Taylor Wimpey site primarily, and the financial contributions were going to be paid to the county council anyway. So then there was an EU procurement issue in terms of paying a developer public money for public infrastructure projects. So it was decided in the end that it would be much simpler, and it would be much more likely that the relief road would be delivered in a coordinated and effective way if that role was taken on by the county council. And I suppose it's also worth pointing out that this is the same as a lot of other road infrastructure requirements, associated developments. The developer will be required to make a financial contribution to the county council for off-site works, improvements to roundabouts, for example, or widening of roads, providing a bus stops and things. The money will be paid to the county council, and then it will be up to the county council to spend that money and to deliver the infrastructure works that are required. So I think that answers the first question. In terms of the developer's contribution, that is set out in the report. So the financial contribution from this developer will be £1 million. Just over £1.3 million, but £4.4 million has already been secured as part of site S2A. So that was what I was referring to earlier. So that's a combination of Taylor Wimpey and Crest Nicholson, also forming part of the South Malden Garden suburb. So if you add those two together, that was around £6 million that was envisaged that the road would cost to build, and that was identified and agreed as part of the LDP process. So and in terms of would it be the right thing to do to take contributions from North Heybridge, I think, as I've mentioned earlier, this relief road isn't just to serve or take the extra traffic generated from the South Malden Garden suburb. There will be extra traffic generated in the vicinity of this site as a result of the North Heybridge developments that are going on. But as part of the local plan process, the cost and the requirements to deliver these pieces of infrastructure were divided up between the relevant developments as reasonably as possible. And there is, certainly one of the 106 agreements for one of the sites in North Heybridge, the 106 have quite clearly been worded in a way that would allow the money from that financial contribution to be used for projects such as the South Malden Relief Road. And I think at the time that money was secured, the county council were expecting that money to be contributed towards building of the North Heybridge Relief Road, but as it's turned out, the developer the countryside, I think it is, they're required to build the whole of the relief road without any financial contributions from anywhere else. So there does appear to be some extra money or associated with the North Heybridge development that could be used if necessary. I mean, that's sort of the worst case scenario that Mr. Lee was talking about earlier. If extra money was needed in South Malden. Thank you.
Councillor Hurd, we need to get on, unless this is very relevant.
I just want to come back on that. So I understand that the developer's contribution would be £1 million, and the overall cost is £6 million. Is that correct?
I don't think that is what Miss Matthews said. I think she said that the contribution was 1-point-something million and 4-point-something million from elsewhere. She didn't say that that was the total amount needed, as I understand. Miss Matthews, is that correct?
Yes, it was that was the sum of money that at the time the local plan was being developed, thought that looked like that would be enough to build the relief road, based on the information that was available at the time, and so that's the money that has been secured through the 1/6 agreements. We obviously no one here, no one can actually say that is definitely going to be enough. We'll find out that once the exact costing of the road has been carried out by the County Council, and they are in the process of doing that. So we should know fairly soon whether what the actual cost of the relief road is likely to be, and then if planning permission has been granted for the relief road, then the County Council can look to secure. Ensure that the money is available for doing the relief road at the time.
Thank you. Councillor Swain.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, initially when I saw this application, I thought it was going to be Groundhog Day. As I understand it, the previous application stalled because of a non-signing of a Section 106 agreement. So if the altered financing of the ring road, the relief road, has met the problem there, then we can be a little bit more optimistic about the development. However, I have a different view about the relief road, and I think it needs to be rethought. It seems to all this discussion has been in the absence of what Highways England are planning to do for the A12, and it seems to me it's much more important that Malden and Heybridge have a decent connection to the new junction 21 on the A12 than this relief road. If we do, this relief road, which was predicated on traffic from North Heybridge, and which is the reason why it's now been put back because of the lack of progress with the North Heybridge Garden suburb. It seems to me more traffic is likely to go, if rather than round Malden through Danbury, people will want to go straight up to junction 21 on the A12. So if there is a relief road, it's more likely to be for traffic moving around up to Wick Hill than the other way around. I think this rather makes that section 5.10.12 a little bit either irrelevant, or at least it needs to be looked at again. We need a revised strategic view of the traffic of the road network for Malden from the County Council. The relief road is linked to some extent with the development of Area 4, which includes the community land, and as Mr. Mann mentioned, that should include a health centre, which is desperately needed in the area. But if you look at the timetable for the staging of this and for applications for reserved matters and so on, and take the obverse of a critical path, see how late things can happen, we could, on this basis, not have the community land available, assuming that 1.53 hectares is enough for it, which I'm not sure about. We may not have that available until mid-2030s. I note the Highways have said that they're happy with all housing egressing on the Linden roundabout, and the possibility that there could be a temporary junction, which may not be proved to be so temporary, for the Area 4. So if that can be shown to be feasible and acceptable to highways, I would want to see that Area 4 and the community land there brought forward to a much earlier stage in the whole process. Otherwise, we're going to be waiting another 10 or 15 years before there's any chance of getting the community facilities there.
Councillor Swain, thank you. I don't think we're able to redesign this planning application, which in part you're suggesting. Councillor Lagan. Councillor
Thank you,
Lagan.
Chair. Yeah, I've just got to turn me mic on, Bob. The thing that concerns me, I won't go over it, I have lots of concerns, but my other members have covered those, is the health hub. The relief road are not turning up until 2028 in the air pollution, but the health hub, the detail on that is a little bit vague, to say the least. And as Councillor Swain has said, with the long needed medical facilities that this district deserves and needs, is that going to be adequately provided to by what I consider to be a nondescript terminology of a hub? So what exactly does that mean, and when is that going to be delivered? Thank you.
Thank you. Again, I don't think that is completely relevant in part, but Miss Matthews, would you like to attempt? I mean, what I'm saying is we're not dealing with a health hub at the moment. We're dealing with the relief road. Miss Matthews.
Thank you, Chairman. So the application, I just brought it up, now it's gone. So the application refers to that piece of land, Area 4, that was Phase 4 by Councillor Logan. So the community land is identified for Class C2 and or D1, which could include, for example, a hospital, a residential care home, clinic, health centre and or a day centre. So at the moment, that is just an area of land that's been identified for having potential for potentially quite a wide variety of uses. Some sort of health hub or clinic or hospital would fall within that Class D1 use, which if this plan permission is granted, would allow for. But again, the details of any use for that site and the phasing of the whole development would be something that would be dealt with as part of, or at least advance of, or as part of any reserve matters application coming in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stamp.
Chairman, I withdrew it because Councillor Bamford asked my question. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
Thank you, Chairman. My concern is, and it's not very clear from the layout and the diagram showing the access, if we don't have this relief road, where will the access be from the existing roads, and how many access points will there be for what sounds like 300 houses? And are we then creating an accident black spot on the A414? So could you be clear exactly where the access points are on the diagrams?
Very succinct question. Miss Matthews.
Okay, thank you. Just bringing up a drawing. Okay. Okay, so this is an illustrative master plan that came in with the application, which shows, again, it's illustrative, but it shows that the housing development would have an access off what we call the Linden Homes roundabout here, and that's the access which the County Council have suggested would be enough, at least in the short term, to provide access for the residential development. The employment land, which is in this position here, would be accessed off the existing road network through Knowles farm. So that just leaves the community land, which is shown to be accessed off the relief road. But this is again, you know, these are sort of details that would be determined at a future date in terms of exactly the phasing of the development, when the relief road would be built, clarification of when it might be needed, and the funding arrangements available for it. So it's not something that can be or should be decided as part of the current application. If the relief road isn't provided for whatever reason in time for providing access to the community land, then the alternatives would need to be looked at to provide access to the community land, and there are options, for example, providing some sort of road along the line of where the relief road might go. I mean, that could end, if that would be an option.
We seem to be getting some feedback from you.
Oh,
can you adjust the mic or something?
Maybe,
anyway, sorry to have interrupted you.
I don't think I had much more to say, but but in terms of access points, and in the residential the intention would be that there would be more than one access way into the residential parcels of land in the longer term, certainly once the relief road is provided. But I think, as I suggested earlier, then the decisions about the road infrastructure and when it's needed to be done, that would be based on the most up-to-date traffic flow information. If I think it was suggested earlier that the A12 improvements might change what's needed, so but that would all be discussed, and as I say, these meetings are going to be meetings with the county council officers to discuss the infrastructure delivery, which will include considerations relating to Highways England's plans for the A12. There's the Bradwell B project would also would change the dynamics of traffic within the district as a whole potentially. So that all would all sort of be brought together and thought about strategically, not just this site by itself. And there is also the need to reassess the traffic flows within the district in light of the pandemic and what it becomes the new normal in the sort of medium term and longer term potentially as a result of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I just make a comment? Chairman,
please, Councillor Siddle.
Thank you very much, Chairman. What I'm really also now very concerned about is it looks like there's just one access point into this site, and if there was an emergency of some sort, we are now causing a situation where there's 320 houses with one access in and out, which doesn't sound a very good design to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Siddle. Now I've got Councillor Durham, Morley and White left to speak. Then I've also got Councillor Swain, who wants to question condition 22, which I'll allow, and Councillor Bamford wishes an additional recommendation, which we'll look at when the speakers are finished. Councillor Durham.
Chairman, thank you. Chairman, we're going round and round in circles, and I think there's a great danger we're overthinking this. You know, it's already been explained. The road will be covered with a 106, which is a legally binding contract. So that we have to deal with at the correct time. The relief road is a relief road, exactly that, not designed as you will have just seen. There is only one access onto the development from the relief road. Sorry, my dog's going mad in the background. So, look, Chairman, this is in our LDP. We would be certainly seen by PINS to be unreasonable to refuse it. The time to go debating some of the subjects that have already been raised, quite rightly, members have concerns, is not at this stage, it's at subsequent stages. So, Chairman, you know, notwithstanding the outstanding issues, which can be dealt with in the future, I think we should move on and get this get this agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Dunn. Now, the last speaker is Councillor White. Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a few things I want to discuss. One is condition 33, due to the Linden Homes wouldn't have been granted if we'd had the updated conditions. That's just something I want to make sure it's watertight, ha. I also have concerns about the horse crossing, because we absolutely discussed that the last time this came around, and yet it appears to be missing this time. So I suggest there's extra conditions regarding the horse crossing. The bridleway, I thought the existing bridleway, which was to the west of the development, was still going to stay there. I don't know if the officer can confirm that for me. On the section 106 for the road, I also think no additional funding from anywhere else, because as Councillor Hurd said, the developer agreed to fund that road. And I don't think that any other money we might have left over should be used to help another developer. And I actually propose that this is deferred until some of these other questions are answered, because the problem we're at, Councillor Durham says, no, hang on, we'll just agree these conditions. But every time that happens, we get to this next stage with the reserve matters, and we say, but we wanted this put, and they go, sorry, it wasn't in the outline. So, you know, I don't know if the officer's going to ask that condition, but I do want to, I think this should be deferred, because I don't think we have enough information.
Seconded.
That's a proposal that's been proposed and seconded. I'll have to take that later. I'll continue now and ask Councillor Swain what is his issue with condition 22.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. That refers to green infrastructure management and maintenance. Should it not include blue infrastructure as well, drainage, SUDs and so on?
Ms Matthews.
Hopefully there won't be so much interference now. Move my mic slightly further away. This condition is just about the green infrastructure management. The SUDs and surface water management, we've got condition 33. So although those details of surface water drainage would come in as
34
as required by that condition, and there are a number of conditions under that heading talking about surface water drainage and maintenance of water courses. So hopefully that answers that question.
Thank you. Councillor Bamford, what is your additional condition you wish to the council to consider?
Thank you, Chairman. It follows on from my previous question. I know that Matt Lee did answer it, but I want to make absolutely sure this is in the section 106. So I want to say that I'm happy to propose agree the recommendation, subject to the 2 bullet points on 5, 10, 12 of the report definitely being included in the section 106 agreement.
That's not an amendment to the conditions, but an amendment to the 106. Ms Matthews.
Well, it said, no, Chairman, with respect, it does say in 5, 10, 12 that Essex County Council has suggested that this could be included in the section 106 agreement, but I'm not seeing that it is there on the papers. No, so I want to make sure it is.
I understand. What I'm explaining is that that's not a planning condition, but that will be something in the 106 agreement itself. Ms Matthews or Mr Lee?
Yeah, okay, I can answer that, I think. So in terms of that first bullet point in 5.10.12, with the advice from the council solicitor is that is not an obligation that would or should be in any 106 agreement, because it's not enforceable, it's not precise enough. That's not to say that collaborative working wouldn't occur. That's going to occur anyway, but that wouldn't be an obligation that should be in a 106 agreement, as I say, because of its enforceability and lack of precision. And the other one, again, regular meetings, that's something that is going to happen anyway. But again, that wouldn't be something that would will meet the test of an obligation within a Section 106 agreement.
Yeah, but you say that meetings will be happening anyway. So in what part of the conditions is this enclosed with? The meetings?
It's not a condition. It's something that is going to be happening, or is already happening, as part of the district as a whole, and the delivery of the infrastructure that is required for developments that are identified within the local plan. Many of those are dependent, or certainly the highways related ones are dependent on the county council delivering that infrastructure, using money that has been secured through various developments throughout the district, Malden and Heybridge, and being part of them. So those meetings, I understood, were happening, but because of due to staff leaving and changes, they have fallen by the wayside slightly. But they are now going to be happening again. So that would involve officers from the policy section in Malden and the Section 106 officer, and those involved with the local plan delivery, as well as those necessary people from the county council responsible for delivering the infrastructure and it's always been a collaborative approach, because it's that these infrastructure projects and needs have been identified by the county council in the past, and we've worked together to produce the local plan and identifying the infrastructure delivery plan as part of that, and so that's something that will continue in the future.
Thank you. Right, now I do have a proposal for deferment, and this is giving me some problems. The recommendation, the motion that we're debating is to agree the recommendations. Now, although this amendment, or this amendment would not negate that, it will delay it, and I've got a problem. Mr. Lee, is there a time constraint on this application?
Through you, Chairman. Firstly, though, obviously, I know members have said they would like it delayed for additional information, but I think officers would like to have it much clearer what specific information it is that is sought, because it may be a case that officers don't consider it's possible to get that, because this is an outline application and certain matters will not be available for information at this stage. With all applications, obviously the applicant has the right to appeal non-determination. If the applicant is probably fearful or concerned that members won't support it, that may be an option that the applicant looks at. As I've said, I've got concerns about the ability for the information that members are looking for to actually be delivered to them. So it may be that the applicant would decide to appeal on non-determination rather than be able to not provide the information that is sought. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, is there a time constraint?
Well,
I think I
the
asked.
application's from 2017, so
There's not.
Or it's not, as in it's not out of time because we've got an agreement of extension of time, but that will expire sooner rather than later, and the applicant may not choose to embrace it. So there's always a time constraint.
When does it expire then, Mr. Lee? I'm sorry to press you.
That's fine, but Catherine, have you got that date?
Yes, end of August.
So to wait, which I suggest that the information that Miss White was looking for, and I think Councillor Hurd, on how much the road is going to cost, is not likely to come in before then. So therefore, I think
that's also, that information's outside of the applicant's control. That is something that Essex County Council are working on. And as explained previously, obviously, this is actually, while the road is on this piece of land, the actual funding of the actual road is predominantly facilitated through other sites that already have planning permission.
Yeah,
and that is something that members need to be aware of.
I think you've clarified. I'm not going to allow the amendment, Ms. White, and I shall move to the vote on this.
Mr. Chairman, if I might just come back. It's only because every time we do this, we have to agree these things. Then when it comes back at reserved matters, they always say, "Oh, sorry, you agreed it at the outline stage."
I'm well aware of what you're saying, Miss White, but I think I need to move this on, and I'll move.
If I might just butt in, could we ask for the horse crossing and the bridleway to be reinstated? Because I know we discussed them in 2017. I absolutely know it was discussed.
Well, I didn't think they'd been removed. I think this, as you've pointed out, is a question that comes up all the time on this Malden South developments, and it's always from memory. It's always there. Miss Matthews, is that correct?
Through Chairman, yes, I think Councillor White was suggesting that the western part of the right-of-way was remaining, so that is correct. The existing line of the bridleway remains the same. It will be the bit, the section that's closest to Wick Hill that would need realignment to accommodate the relief road. But that, as far as I'm aware, that is the same as what was on the table as back in 2017. There are other elements of the bridleway network that will form part of the development to the south of Spittal Road or the Malden Road, members have considered the part of that development, phase 1, but the bridleway will going to form part of later phases.
Okay, Tara, would you call the roll, please? Tara, you there?
Yes, Chairman, I'm here. Yes, members, as usual, I'm going to call the names out alphabetically. If you can identify whether you're for, or against, or abstaining, please. Starting with Councillor Bamford, please.
Well, Chairman, I did ask to come back before the vote because I'm happy to agree, provided I can have the officer's assurance that some legal advice is given about incorporating some of this information in those 2 bullet points that I've made, just to protect our council, because we have an infrastructure delivery plan. We need to protect ourselves.
Councillor Bamford, I believe that the officers have already given you this assurance that legal advice was that it shouldn't go in. Tara, please move to the vote.
What I'd like, Mr. Chairman, with respect, is to ask the officers to make sure that the legal advice includes something, maybe not what that wording, but something, because Essex County Council suggested that goes in. So something needs to go in to protect our council.
Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Chairman.
You'll have to repeat yourself.
Thank you, Chairman. The Section 106 and the phasing plans across the developments require that either already do require, will require that the road is there to mitigate the harm in a phased approach. In response to the point about meetings and things, there has always been a collaborative approach. Historically, meetings had occurred. At the moment, Essex are now looking to work out the funding of it and have started to use some of this drawn down money for that. Until that progresses, there's no need for any additional meetings, but once that has come, that will do. So officers will continue, as they always have done, and in best practice, to work collaboratively with Essex County Council. And the point is, this isn't an issue of highways delivering a road. This is a combined project for Essex and Malden District Council. It's our infrastructure. We only require it because the housing that we've required through the LDP, and we will work with them to deliver it. And I think that is just a standard wording that would go into any Section 106 for example, on the other 2 sites. So I don't think it needs anything additional, and I do have concerns that anything above that would actually either be signed by Essex or meet the legal requirements. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that explanation. Tara, would you now call the roll, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Starting Councillor Bamford, please.
For.
Councillor Bassinger.
Refuse.
Councillor Beale.
For.
Brian Beale, not present, sorry. Councillor Bell.
Against.
Boyce.
Abstain.
Councillor Mrs Channer.
For.
Durham. He's for, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Durham. Councillor Edwards.
For.
Councillor Mrs Fleming.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Fluker.
For.
Is that for, Councillor Fluker? Sorry.
For.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harker.
Against.
Councillor Hurd.
Against.
Councillor Helm.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hull.
Abstain. Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Against.
Councillor Lagan.
Against, please, Tara.
Councillor Mays.
Against.
Councillor Morley.
For.
Councillor Morris.
Against.
Councillor Nunn.
Against.
Councillor Shaughnessy.
Against.
Councillor Siddle.
Against.
Councillor Skeens.
Against.
Councillor Stamp. Councillor Stamp.
Against. Sorry, Tara, a bit slow on the iPad. Against.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stilts.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Swain.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Thompson.
For.
Councillor Miss White.
Against.
It's 9 for, 17 against, and 2 abstentions.
Thank you, Tara. That is
Chairman.
therefore lost, and I ask those that voted against to provide us with some reasons for refusal, please.
Insufficient.
I might add sustainable reasons for refusal.
Bob's now grinning.
Insufficient information relating to the building of the relief road, which should, according to the original agreement, be built by the developer.
Thank you, Councillor Harker. That was what I was struggling for. Well said.
Sorry.
Yeah, and I'd also like to add in that original additions agreed during the original planning permission have not been implemented in these conditions. They've been missed off.
Yeah.
Lack of community land descriptor.
Through you, Chairman, can I come back on those points?
Please.
Firstly, obviously, this is still the same application that members looked at previously. This isn't a different application because the Section 106 was never signed. Furthermore, this site will provide the financial contribution required through the LDP. This is not that they are paying less or they're, for want of a better phrase, getting out of any funding. This is still the financial requirement that the LDP requires, which is our policy. Whether or not there is a shortfall is a moot point on actually determination of this application. It's about what was required through the LDP. So, you know, this site is policy compliant in that respect. And in relation to things such as lack of detail on the community land, this is an outline application. This is accepting the principle that there will be a parcel of land. It would be unreasonable to expect to have any greater detail at this stage for those points. So my professional advice is I have concerns with those for reasons for refusal. If members consider, such as Councillor White, that there were a couple of points that she thinks could have been indicated, that could, through additionality, that's a separate matter, but wouldn't necessarily form a reason for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
So, Mr. Lee, what you're saying is that the reasons for refusal are not sustainable, but Councillor Harker's did sound quite reasonable to me.
Through you, Chairman, the policy, the council requires a certain amount of funding through the LDP, and this scheme delivers that. The fact that the applicant is no longer building the road and it's now Essex County Council, actually, in reality, personally and professionally, I consider is a better situation, and it's not, to use a colloquialism, the applicant getting out of it. As was explained by Ms Matthews, it's actually much easier, much more deliverable for the county to deliver it, because otherwise we have to go through extensive procurement processes, through the Europe legislation and everything. Well, actually, Essex County Council can just deliver it through the funding. So the points that were raised, I actually don't see as having any planning merit. Thank you, Chairman.
It's taxpayers' money.
Do you, Chairman? That's the exact point. It is taxpayers' money, and if Essex deliver it, they can do that. If they have to give money they pick up from the other sites to a developer, there's actual legal requirements whether or not it actually can be done. And also, if they do, they have to go through a very, very extensive procurement process. Thank you, Chairman.
I have a suggestion that we can disagree with the phasing as a condition for a refusal. Mr. Lee, what's your opinion of that?
Through you, Chairman, the phasing hasn't been agreed. That is required through the application. So that wouldn't be a reason for refusal, because it's not on the table at this moment. It could be varied. If we've got conditions that members aren't happy with, we can play with them, but it wouldn't form a reason for refusal.
Okay. Right. I'm going to ask for, after the advice of Mr. Lee, in spite of the advice of Mr. Lee, I'm going to ask members to propose some reasons for refusal, because this is what we have to do. We can't just say no, we have to have reasons for refusal.
If I might, Bunting, I'd like to suggest that it is insufficient information due to the change of policies at Malden District Council since the planning permission was approved in 2017.
Can you highlight what policies have changed, please?
No, not offhand. I'm sure Mr. Lee can assist.
Through you, Chairman, this is an allocated site in the LDP. The only way that the policies have changed is it's become more in line with them, not less. The LDP was adopted in July, 20th of July 2017. This is a policy compliance scheme on an allocated site. You know, the only change in policy position is stronger, not weaker. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I have no confidence that this road will be built, and I do not agree with robbing Peter to pay Paul. We've got enough development required in Heybridge without robbing Heybridge to build a road in Malden.
Yeah, well, that's a fair point.
That the road's
I'm still looking for some reasons for refusal.
They're not implementable. The road will not be built by county.
Chairman,
Brian, you voted for the houses to be built in Uxbridge.
Chairman, can I ask Mr. Lee a question, please?
Yes, Councillor Durham.
Yeah, Mr. Lee, will this impact on our 5-year land supply?
Yes.
Well, yeah, obviously, Councillor Durham, this is one of our allocated sites, and if this doesn't come forward, there will be an impact on our ability to deliver a 5-year land supply.
Yeah, so what we've effectively just done then is open the door to hostile development.
Obviously, without running the numbers, I wouldn't want to say one thing or the other.
The decision has been made. I need reasons for refusal. Councillor Morris, you had a suggestion? You've gone away.
I was just noting that Councillor Harker was in agreement to the housing in Heybridge that that he's just brought up. That's all I was saying.
Oh, well, that's not helping. That's not helping me. I need at least one reason for refusal, members.
That's not helping Heybridge, is it?
Councillor Shaughnessy.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm really not sure if this is a reason for refusal, but I would just like it noted. My two things that I suggested earlier, that care is taken where the 3-storey buildings are to be situated and not right by somebody's boundary. And also, I'm still not happy about the bridleway being changed onto the Wick Hill road. So I would like those noted, please, but I'm not sure if they are reasons for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Lee. Councillor Morris, can you switch off?
This should have been deferred. This should have been deferred.
Councillor Morris, can you switch your video off, please?
Yeah, in a minute. This should have been deferred. Is there any way we can defer this?
The decision has been taken to refuse. So no, we can't, because Mr. Lee also explained that to defer it, you need reasons why you want it deferred. And he explained the main reason that was suggested for deferring was the cost of the road. And he was saying that can't be quantified. And it's not likely to be quantified anytime soon.
Chairman, can I say something, please?
Please do, Councillor Stamp.
Chairman, the developer, I'm sure, is very reasonable, the same as Malden District Council. I'm sure they don't want to go to a planning appeal and all the added expense. Cannot the District Council and the planning team speak to the developer after this meeting, who I'm sure has been watching this meeting with great interest, and say, I'm sure you understand the members' concerns. Is there anything you can do to alleviate them and then bring it back? Does he have a free go? That is going to be a free cost, Chairman. Does Mr. Lee know? And do that. That's happened before at Malden District, hasn't it?
But also the developer will appeal as well as having another go, perhaps.
Not necessarily, depending on the conversation, Chairman.
I can't say. But if under what we've got at the moment, or what I'm dealing with at the moment, without viable reasons for refusal, he doesn't have to worry about the cost of going to appeal, because we'll be paying for his costs at appeal.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just trying to think of a way around it, Chairman. I'm just trying to think of a way around it, Chairman. I'm well aware that we are liable for the costs, but I'm sure that he, because it is a strategic site, is going to be amenable.
Right.
Through you, Chairman, for clarity on
Mr. Lee,
the applicant in theory would have a free go, but the point is that if members' reason for refusal is that they want information that is not within the gift of the applicant, he would never be able to resubmit an application to overcome that reason for refusal, and therefore he would have no other option but to appeal.
Lack of emergency access.
Yes, it's a 320 development cul-de-sac.
Or design.
It's a cul-de-sac.
Highways haven't put in an objection, but I'm quite willing to listen to that.
Chairman, it is a safety issue, and with the highways, we know highways never ever put things forward to go against any development at Malden District. I've never seen one anyway. So surely it goes against. Hang on, Councillor Morris.
Can we get back to some normality here, please?
Yes,
will all members please switch off their videos?
Chairman, I'm trying to say that we in our LDP always said we wouldn't have cul-de-sacs. It was against, I can't remember which blooming design guide or whatever it was at the time. We was always concerned because it happened at opposite me on the Burr West site. We don't want cul-de-sacs for the sheer safety information problem.
I'm getting a sense that somebody might be coming up with that. Councillor Nunn, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, lack of certainty in respect of access and infrastructure causing potential concerns regarding traffic movement, including concerns regarding emergency services.
Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Seconded.
Right.
Chairman,
I know what the answer is, but we need to move forward.
Chairman.
Can we ask Mr. Lee what he thinks of that? Mr. Lee, what do you think of that? We pay him a good wage. He's a good guy. He knows his pickles.
I can tell you what Mr. Lee will say, but that's not where we are. Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee.
Chairman, if I may, I'm sorry if I interrupt Mr. Lee.
Mrs. Shaughnessy, please.
I haven't had a reply to my to previous concerns for my ward members. Thank you, Chairman.
Through you, Chairman, in relation to Councillor Shaughnessy's point, she said she just wanted them noted and didn't discuss whether they were reasons for refusal. I think they were explained by not Councillor Matthews, Miss Matthews, that they wouldn't really be appropriate for reasons of refusal because it's more about a reserved matters assessment rather than an outline stage where it's just the principle.
Okay.
In relation to the reason, sorry.
I appreciate that, but they are concerns for my ward members, and so if you could please, Mr. Matthews, make a note of those. It's the height of the three-storey buildings being close to
we're not.
resident and also the bridleway. I would like
we don't actually know where the buildings will be on that site, so we can't have that. I would not advise that to reason for refusal.
Okay, but then I would like that noted that you know that they're not right by current residents on Wick Hill. Thank you.
And in relation to the reason for refusal, the Highway Authority haven't raised an objection. The Highway Authority are comfortable with this. It is in accordance with our LDP. But if members wish, my advice would be that it's not particularly defendable, or it's not at all defendable or robust reason for refusal. But as always, it's in members' gift to come to the decision they come to.
Yeah, members, you've heard that that's not defendable, but it's the only one we've got on the table. For a reason for a refusal, and that will satisfy me at this stage. Do members agree that reason for a refusal?
Sorry, Chair, could I
agree? But I would still like to add in insufficient information on some of the items.
And also, Chair, we could put in concern that the Malden District Council infrastructure delivery plan will not be achieved. Perhaps we could add that in along with concerns about the just big one access.
My advice, if Mr. Lee thinks that's sustainable or defendable, then put it in. But my advice to the council, to the committee, would be don't put in too many reasons for a refusal, because there'll be costs. If we lose, there'll be costs against each reason for refusal. So one reason for refusal might protect the council financially. Mr. Lee, is that a fair summary?
Yes.
Yep, through you, Chairman. Yes, that is it's always best to have the strongest reasons possible rather than a lot of reasons for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Nunn, Tara, did you get Councillor Nunn's proposal?
Chairman, if we could just ask Councillor Nunn to read it through again. I got the majority of it. I just want to make sure we've got all of it.
Yeah. Councillor Nunn, would you do that again, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not precious about the wording, so I'm happy for it to be looked at. Lack of certainty in respect of access and infrastructure causing potential concerns regarding traffic movement, including emergency services.
Sorry,
okay.
Chairman, can I just for a point of clarity, we're saying lack of certainty, but the applicant has stated where the access is, so there is no lack of certainty. We are 100% sure where it is. If members aren't happy with that, that's a separate point, but we need to make sure any reason for refusal is as robust as it can be. Let's put it that way.
With your permission, Chair, the reason that I'm saying lack of certainty is if there is a relief road, there are two other ways onto that site. If there isn't a relief road, there's one.
Yeah, but you refused the the committee has refused the application, so there's
Through Chairman, we haven't refused the application yet. There's been no vote.
Oh, but I thought we just voted.
We just refused. We didn't approve it.
Yeah.
So
we need a
members have to
substantive
vote.
motion.
Yeah. Members need to vote on this reason for refusal once it's agreed.
Yeah. Okay. But that's what we've got. Tara, did you get that time?
Yes, Chairman. Thank you very much. Yes, got that.
Right. Then there's the.
Bob, I'm just going to make a suggestion. If we haven't had the vote for refusal, would it be wise to take up Councillor Stamp's suggestion and instead vote for deferment to give them the applicants time to?
We have refused the recommendation and the application. What we need a substantive motion on is the reason for refusal for that refusal. So the decision has already been taken. We can't defer unless Mr. Lee thinks otherwise. Mr. Lee?
Thank you, Chairman. The issue is, as I've already explained, that this information that members are looking for, firstly, isn't in the applicant's control. Secondly, is the provision that they're proposing is LDP compliant. And thirdly, is actually quite a small percentage of the financial figure we've got coming to us for this relief road from the other site. So I'm unclear on what the point of deferral would be, more than to say, and as I said, it's outside their control anyway when this information would be. So it's not really a reason for deferral, in my opinion. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, I'll actually put this to members. It's against what I feel is right, but if members want to defer this.
Question for Mr. Lee.
Yes, good, Councillor Morris.
I would just like to ask Mr. Lee what he would use as the most robust reason for refusal. What is your advice, Matt?
Through you, Chairman. Obviously, I've listened to the debate and I can pull out succinct points that may be relevant to help to support members through a reason for refusal. And I know members are probably quite used to me doing that. My professional opinion is I've heard nothing in this debate that forms a reason for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Which is why.
Sorry, I can't. My response is that nothing is of a defendable reason for refusal that I've heard.
Which is why
my
I
professional
didn't
opinion.
ask Mr. Lee to come up with a reason for refusal, Councillor Morris. However,
Chairman,
Councillor Swain.
One angle is that it's not clear whether the interim access for Area 4 or the community area is feasible and acceptable. It's been mentioned, but we can't be sure that it will actually work.
I have got a reason for refusal. I don't think that would help, Councillor Swain, but I'm getting the consensus that members would like to go back on their decision, which I wouldn't normally allow, but this is so important, and I'll allow the vote on a deferral, although of course the deferral is not going to achieve anything, as Mr. Lee says, but at least it means that the applicant can go to appeal on non-determination at the end of August. Is that correct, Mr. Lee?
Yeah, that they would be able to. What I would highlight is that will not protect the authority in relation to a cost claim. If anything, it would be potentially more damaging.
Okay, thank you for that advice. Right, I'll go back and say I now will take a vote on the substantive motion of a refusal, with the reason for refusal being that's put up by Councillor Nunn and that was duly seconded. Have you got that, Tara?
Yes, Chairman, did you want me to read it back out again?
Please. And this is the substantive motion of refusing the application for the reason of what you're going to read out.
Chairman, Councillor Nunn's proposal was lack of certainty in respect of access and infrastructure causing potential concerns regarding traffic movement, including emergency services.
Right, thank you. Put that to the vote, or is everybody, Tara, call the roll. That's the simplest way.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, as before, we'll start alphabetically. If you could just indicate for, against or abstain, please. Starting with Councillor Bamford, please.
Against.
Ginger.
For.
Miss Beale.
Against.
Councillor Bell.
For.
Voice.
Abstain.
Councillor Mrs Channer.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Durham. He's against. Thank you very much, Councillor Durham. Councillor Edwards.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Fleming.
For.
Councillor Fluker.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Harker.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hurd.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Helm.
Against.
Councillor Hull. Councillor Hull.
Against.
Thank you.
Against.
Against. Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
For.
Councillor Lagan.
For.
Councillor Mays.
For.
Councillor Morley.
Against.
Councillor Morris.
For.
Councillor Nunn.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Shaughnessy.
For.
Siddle.
For.
Councillor Skeens.
For.
Councillor Stamp.
For.
Councillor Stilts.
For.
Councillor Swain.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Miss White.
Against.
Chairman, the result of that vote is 17 for, 9 against and 2 abstentions. Thank you.
That is therefore carried. This application has been refused for the reasons given. Thank you. Can we go on now to agenda item 6?
Chairman, just very quickly, given the length of time that has taken, I think, as I've said on the chat, Councillor Channer and I are under a 3-line whip to attend a group meeting at 3 o'clock. So it's probably better that we leave the meeting now, which is regrettable, but unfortunately it's taken too long to get through the previous item. Thank you.
You might have to explain to members of this council what a 3-line whip is. Thank you, Councillor Durham.
But in politics, the district, that's what it is.
We move to agenda item 6, planning application for land east of Bradwell Power Station, Downhill Beach, Bradwell on Sea, found on pages 135 to 178. Note that members' update in relation to this application has been circulated prior to the meeting, contained on pages 7 to 10. And I will ask Miss Hernan to present her report, please. Miss Hernan.
Thank you, Chairman. Bear with me 1 second just while I share the slide with you. Hopefully that's now showing. So this full application seeks planning permission to carry out ground and load test investigations and associated works, including the creation of 2 site compound areas and associated parking areas. It should be noted that these works are temporary in nature and they're to help inform the design and layout of any new nuclear power station that may be proposed at the site, and to also build on previous preliminary investigations approved and undertaken in accordance with the 2017 permission, and also its associated discharge of condition permissions. This application is, however, for the ground and load test investigation works only, and is not for the erection of a new nuclear power station. The works are to help understand the ground conditions which may have a direct impact on the layout, design and construction of any future facility. So here we have the location plan. It's the main sort of line around the site, and then there's been some areas within the site that have been excluded from the red line boundary as well. This is the site layout plan. So the two areas in the pinky purple hatching are where the two compound areas are proposed. The load test works would take place in the larger area and just to the west of Waymark's farm. I'll show you some more details of these in a moment. And the ground investigation compound is just to the south of Downhall Farm here. This plan shows the access routes and the location of the indicative ground investigation works. The primary access routes are shown in the smaller dotted green line. I'm not sure if you'll be able to differentiate between them as part of this slide, but basically the primary routes are sort of around the main areas. And then the secondary access routes, which would just provide access to the boreholes out to the east of the site and to the north. And then we've got the indicative siting of the ground investigation works in the form of boreholes and trial pits. So this is the ground investigation compound layout. The area will consist of fuel equipment, delivery storage, a skip, welfare cabin and parking for up to 24 vehicles. And this is the load test investigation compound layout. The excavation will take place in the area within the centre, and the material will be stored in buns at either side, so 8 metres in these locations and 6 metres up here. There's also a pollution control pond within the northern area, and then a compound area to the bottom down here where there'll be welfare facilities, further parking, construction office, things like that. It's worth noting that once the works are complete, this area will be restored back to its original condition, and also that the compound areas are on existing hard standing, and so there's not a requirement to remove any vegetation in relation to the area or have any impacts in that respect. So this plan shows the earthworks in a slightly greater detail and relates to the sections that you can see here. And we have some more sections showing the proposed heights of the embankments. Here's some site photos from the surrounding area and also the access to the site. Some more photos. Views from within the site and the control tower, which is actually excluded from the red line boundary. And some more photos within the site. So since the members' update was circulated yesterday, which included letters of representation, a slight amendment to paragraph 5.3.4 of the officer's report and an amendment to condition 5, there have been some further letters of rejection received. It's not considered that they raise any new material considerations and largely relate to ecological and noise impacts of the development. It's noted that a large number of the letters of objection received previously are also in relation to these matters, and many have objected to the principle of a new nuclear power station at the site. Firstly, in relation to ecology, whilst part of the site does fall within a European designation, none of the proposed works will take place within any of the protected sites. Also, extensive consultation has been undertaken with Natural England and the Council's ecological consultant. So, subject to the mitigation measures, the siting of the works, hours of works, which all can be secured by conditions, it's considered that these works are acceptable in ecological terms. And then in terms of noise, the noise report assesses both ecological and residential receptors. which is fully assessed within the officer's report. And there's mitigation measures proposed, including limits to hours and periods of work, siting of the works and noise monitoring. Subject to these matters, it's considered that the noise will be mitigated effectively. I'd also just like to raise to members that the mitigation in relation to noise, including the hours, are similar to the approach that we adopted as part of the 2017 permission. And as I've previously stated, this application isn't for a new nuclear power station, so it should only be assessed on what is being proposed, and that is the groundworks. A lot of the comments we've received relate to the development control order process and the principle of a new nuclear power station, but that's not for consideration. So overall, subject to all the mitigation that's proposed, it's not considered that, and the fact that the works are temporary, it is considered that the works would be largely acceptable and wouldn't result in demonstrable harm over the long term, and therefore it's recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Devon. Right, now, under the Council's public participation scheme, we have received 6 submissions, 5 from objectors, 1 from the Parish Council and 1 from the applicant. I have reviewed the submissions and, in line with the public participation scheme, can advise that of the submissions received from objectors, only the first submission received will be read. And Mr. Johnson will read this out along with the Parish Council and the applicant's submissions. Mr. Johnson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Submission 1 from Linda Gemmell.
You're very quiet again. Move nearer to the mic.
Thank you, Chairman. Submission 1 from Linda Gemmell, an objector. This is a speculative application by a commercial enterprise that has yet to obtain the necessary development consent order. The considerable negative impacts this work would have on the sensitive environment, protected habitats, local residents, and tourism, together with the loss of amenity due to the considerable light, noise, vibration, and traffic, may prove to be completely unnecessary and therefore cannot be justified. Submission 2 from Jean Allen on behalf of Bradwell-on-Sea Parish Council. Although under normal circumstances, the Bradwell-on-Sea Parish Council would understand the need for ground investigations, we cannot agree with the officer's report for this application. We consider that none of the development principles outlined in S1 of the Malden District Plan have been adhered to. The scale of these investigations on our residents, heritage, and ecology would be devastating. Because of the low-lying landscape, sound will travel some distance. To have continuous noise and vibration from 7 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, plus weekend workings, will affect those living in every part of the village, including the school. The Orthona community is a place for quiet and contemplation, and yet is one of the most affected areas for noise and light pollution. Our World War II airfield is not only an important part of our heritage, a memorial to those who gave their lives for this country, but is also a huge tourist attraction. The runway on the airfield would be destroyed beyond repair. Huge boreholes would dig within the vicinity of the hangars. It is claimed that the damage will be temporary and nothing other than visual. However, it is not possible to return the environment to that prior to the work. The submitted BRB ecology report is taken from out-of-date records and is inaccurate. Some data, nothing more than remote sensing. There are concerns noted from the Essex Wildlife Trust and the RSPB, concerns over the limited data, the fact that no nocturnal surveys have been submitted, or data on the water voles and invertebrate species of the River Waymark, Malden Council are not able to determine whether this proposal will lead to adverse effects on this important Ramsar area. This application does not give definite sites or locations of proposed works, so why has it been submitted before accurate details are available? Even if Malden District Council is minded to approve this application, we trust that you will defer a final decision until detailed information is provided.
Mr. Johnson, can I just interrupt you before you read the next one to say that we did actually have another submission from a parish council, I think Mayland Parish Council, but they were out of time to include in this agenda. Thank you. Would you please carry on?
Thank you, Chairman. Submission 3 from Andrew Murdoch, the Project Development Director and the applicant. Firstly, we would like to thank the committee for allowing us to make representations today. We would also like to thank officers and consultees for their work on the application and to members of the public that submitted their feedback. We are seeking planning permission for ground investigations on land adjacent to the existing Bradwell Power Station. As the committee will be aware, this site has been identified by government as potentially suitable for a new nuclear power station. This means that the government considers that this site is appropriate for a new nuclear power station in principle. However, the local impacts of the project need to be considered thoroughly through the development consent order process, with the Secretary of State ultimately deciding whether they are acceptable. The investigation works that we are applying for today are required to inform the design of the proposed new power station, that in turn will be consulted upon through our statutory consultation before then being applied for through the DCO application. The works themselves are detailed more fully in the officer's report, but in summary, these comprise exploratory investigations spread across the site, a load test investigation focused in the centre, and 2 temporary site compounds on existing hard-standing areas. The investigation works are temporary and are anticipated to be completed in 2 stages of November 2020 for the ground investigations and October 2022 for the load test element. Once finished, the site will be returned to its former condition of agricultural land. The application is supported by a suite of technical reports which have assessed the proposed works and have been considered by statutory consultees. As part of this, a package of measures is proposed to manage the works and minimize impacts on ecological receptors and neighboring residents. This includes measures to control noise levels in accordance with the proposed planning condition and submitted noise appraisal, which are secured through the operator's contracts and will be monitored against by qualified personnel. We will also regularly keep the local residents of Bradwell and the parish council informed of what is happening at the site. This application is not for the proposed power station, but it is necessary now to inform the ongoing design of the power station that we ultimately consult on and apply for, and ensure that its effects are fully understood and can be appropriately mitigated. Our work on the Bradwell B proposal are ongoing, with the extended stage 1 consultation closing last Wednesday. We are continuing to develop our proposals and will work with the council, statutory consultees, relevant bodies, and the public in forthcoming months and years before submitting an application for a development consent order. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I'll now move the recommendation. Is that seconded? It's not seconded?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, I'll second it.
Right. We now put it open to members, and I have a long list starting with Councillor Lagan. Councillor Lagan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to rationalise my list because there are so many members that deserve to speak, but I just want to talk about a few things that stuck out of the officer's report to me that caused concern, and there's some points and there's also some questions. So if you'd be gracious with me, I'll go through the points and then ask the question at the end. We talk about in section 3.25, load investigation would involve trenches 200 metres by 100 wide, 8 to 10 metres deep, with further excavations to the bottom of the excavations, but we don't give any detail on the depth of those further investigations. Section 3.2.6, we talk about boreholes being only indicative in the site plan and generally no location. I don't think that's a detailed enough consideration. We talk about 3.2.13 with the working hours, which has been touched upon, but they talk in the officer's report about daylight hours only. I believe that's outside our permitted in the LDP and therefore a breach of our own policy. And conveniently enough, a lot of that will be done in summer, which would cause a great amount of distress to the residents in the area. 3.3.1 says it would not have a detrimental impact on the character and landscape of the area. So these massive earth trenches, spoils, noise, loss of ecology and nuisance to the residents isn't classified as harm. I'd like to check that. Then point 5, where we talk about main considerations of our own policy S1, the 5.1.1 presumes in favour of sustainable development, and we talk about the efficient use of energy and renewables, coastal management mitigations against flooding. Well, in point 4 of our own policy, we talk about avoids flood zones 2 and 3, which it doesn't in this potential excavation work. In point 5, it says to conserve and enhance the natural environment. Well, it's clearly in breach of that. In point 6, it says conserve and enhance the historic environment. Further down in the policy, it talks about where the locations of the drill holes and boreholes are going to be. Therefore, you are going to touch on and impact historic environment. Our policy and D4 to support is being reviewed. So that's a statement that we've already agreed at full council, and that conflicts with our own policies going forward. 5.1.7 talks about employment. The employment will not be localised. We will not have the benefit, the economic benefit that it brings in, because it would be a migrant workforce, because we just simply do not have the expertise in the district to do some of this work. Having worked on national infrastructure projects across the world, I know that. 5.2 talks about visual impact on the area. We talk about a high quality built environment, members. This is not. 5.2.2 of the NPPF talks about good design, making areas better for people. This proposal in its investigative works and the compounds does not comply with that. The side compound with the buns talks about 10 metres. It would still be visible. Would that not be materially harmful? 5.2.10, we would not encroach on the natural landscape and result in a loss of character in the area. But surely that's a clear reason for refusal. I'm nearly there, Chair. 5.3, heritage and archaeology. 5.3.1 talks about 4 grade 2 listed buildings and they're omitted from the boundary line. Interesting. 5.3.3, we talk about unlikely to harm. The blister hangers, they will be overwhelmed in the size of the spoil piles. 5.4.3, N2 policy, all developments then seek to deliver net biodiversity. And then 5.4.5 of the report says that works are not predicted, keyword, to cause adverse effects. That cannot be guaranteed because the prediction is not a guarantee. 5.4.7, boreholes do lie very close to areas of the Barrow Dyke, and therefore there would be a functionally linked land loss. 5.4.9, Chair, says that the light and visual noise disturbance will occur. It has to occur in works like this. As mentioned in 5.4.15, the RSPB have grave concerns on the impact. 5.5, the impact on the environment. The conservation and enhancement of the natural environment is a key principle in the NPPF and the LDP. This work goes directly against those principles. 5.5.2 has a limited development in the past because of contamination. Does it not concern members about the contamination risk that will come out? 5.5.12 will cause harm because of noise. The threshold will be higher. The residents will be impacted. Policies D1 and 4 therefore would not be followed and therefore would be in breach of our own policies. 5.6.2, the vibration will breach D1 and H4 policies. 5.6.6 is the worst case scenario. It says each borehole will take 2 weeks. I'd invite members to go and do research on how these boreholes are actually drilled and made. They're hammers in essence, and they talk about the noise receptors being 68 LAEQT, which is dBA. They may go up by 10%. That puts it into the additional area of harm. It stipulates in the report that harm Additional mitigants will be needed. They would be visual in screening, therefore there would be towards material harm. 5.6.9 talks about the times. We're talking about 1,900 hours, Chair, to 2,300 hours. That's outside our own policy. That's in white in the report. So finally, with the government concern over Chinese business partners, which this application is made from, I'm very, very concerned that one, we're not in compliance with our own policy, and two, we're doing ourselves and our residents a deep, deep disservice. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Lagan, thank you very much. I know Mr. Lee wishes to speak, but my intention was to leave most of your questions to allow Devon to refer to them all. However, Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, it wasn't working. I'd just obviously like to come back on a couple of points and just talk about the principle of the scheme. Because obviously I think some members may be looking at it disproportionate to actually what the application is. The plan application is for groundworks. The works that they are looking to do are temporary in nature. There are conditions relating to that. There are conditions in relation to noise mitigation and matters such as that. The council has a policy which is adopted. That is our policy at this time for planning applications, that we support the principle of a new nuclear power station. Any decision outside of the local plan process doesn't change the council's current position in relation to its local plan. That will be the legal basis of any future appeal. What I'd also like to say is that obviously if you're looking to build an extension on your house, you have someone come around to make sure there's no trees nearby and things like that. This literally is just that sort of development expanding up. It doesn't facilitate per se or grant any indication that we're supporting the nuclear power station. It is literally just an application for groundworks. It could be in theory for a runway or a new 1,000 houses. Obviously the works would probably be small, or would be smaller in that respect, but that's the point. This is an application for what it is, and members must determine the application in front of them, not what they consider the application to be, but solely for it. A lot of the matters I think that are being raised tie into further considerations and further concerns rather than the application that's in front of them. And as once again I said, this is an application for temporary works. These aren't permanent. So certain concerns that may be had that might remain if this was a permanent dwelling, but in 5 years' time, these developments or this harm will have been removed, and that needs to be a consideration by members when looking at the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Just to come back, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, Mr. Lee, because I did determine the application through its merits on its own. I don't believe that 2 years is temporary.
Councillor Lagan, I was going to say, Mr. Lee, thank you for that explanation, but Councillor Lagan referred to the report and raised a lot of issues that were contained within the report, which I'm hoping that Ms. Herner will be addressing. But as I said, with Councillor Lagan's permission, I'll leave it for some while, because I suspect that other members that wish to speak may be raising the same issues. So if that's agreeable to Councillor Lagan, we'll proceed.
Absolutely, Chairman. Thank you very much indeed, because I appreciate that greatly, because it's a very emotive subject and very important.
We'll proceed.
I'll give way.
We'll proceed to Councillor Nunn.
Thank you very much, Chairman. In addressing my comments, can I please draw the Council's attention to our issue 5.3, heritage. I find it somewhat ironic that this council has just adopted and approved a list of local heritage assets for Bradwell. These include all that's left of the airfield buildings and the airfield site itself, which isn't much nowadays. 5.3.3 admits that that some of these assets will be overshadowed by these works. And it goes on to talk about a detriment of significance. Even our conservation officer has expressed his concerns, particularly about the landscape. Although it says that this will return to its original condition in 5 years, it can't possibly return to its original condition based on the proposal. And will it really after 5 years, or will it be forgotten over time, just as appears to have slipped the memory of some people of the great contribution that was made by the personnel of RAF Bradwell Bay during the Second World War? Surely we can't toss that memory aside by these inappropriate works. Thank you very much, Chair.
Ms Hernan, if the paragraphs that Councillor Nunn referred to are in the list that Councillor Lagan is, and if they're not, would you add them to that list? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, it took me a moment to unmute there. I mean, really, Councillor Lagan has made most of the points that I wanted to make very, very eloquently. Thank you, Councillor Lagan. But with all due respect to Mr. Lee, 78 decibels from dawn till dusk for 5 years is not really the equivalent of doing an extension on your house. These are very, very intrusive works that breach MDC's own policies and the environment. You cannot return the environment to the way that it was. There are endangered species, sensitive sites. It's just these works, not the power station itself, these works will cause irreparable damage and contravene our own policies. So, and additionally, how are we discussing this when the government itself is now questioning whether it will move forward with Chinese involvement in nuclear power? Only 2 nights ago, there was an MP on Newsnight saying there are questions over Chinese involvement. So this is very, very previous to be considering digging up the Dengie Peninsula for something that is likely to never happen. So I urge members to refuse this, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Mays. Councillor Mays. Are you there, Councillor Mays?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I had a problem with my my phone. Yeah, I think a lot has already been said. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay,
lovely. Thank you. I think there is no mention anywhere as to the detriment to humans. There's quite a lot about ecology, but actually there's no mention how residents living in the Bradwell Sea, Bradwell Village, Tillingham, Asheldham, Dengie and beyond are actually going to be affected by this. Again, the long hours, a 7 a.m. start, actually in reality that could be a 5 a.m. start, and the disturbance. I too have noted, as Councillor Bell did, that this contravenes our own policy on the level of noise. These levels are, it says in our own LDP, we should be preventing these. What are the impacts, though, on the actual boreholes themselves? Every single consultee has actually raised concerns about this. You know, RSPB. Interesting that Natural England withdrew their objections, but there we go. Many species are noise sensitive. That's just not a hearing noise, but it's also a seismic noise. None of that has been addressed. There is no information on that impact that will be made. There's also nothing on the groundwater problems that may be experienced, including the water table. Boreholes are used across the world to actually find water. So it's quite likely that these boreholes will find water. What will then happen to the surface and beyond in any of the dikes, etc.? The Environment Agency has also raised more questions than answers. It is very unhappy with the lack of information that has been provided by the applicant for this groundwork application. We might support this in principle. I'm not sure that I would have supported 20 times the size, but nobody has actually addressed the social impacts and the harm that that this development is actually going to do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mays. Councillor Bamford.
Chair. Well, we know that the principle of nuclear is agreed by this council, and we know that the government has agreed Bradwell for nuclear. But what we don't know is whether anyone has agreed such a large-scale proposed power station. And that's what concerns me. There's planning applications for groundworks investigations, but it wouldn't be so large if the proposal of the power station wasn't so large. So we're talking over 200 boreholes, and that's not a figure that's laid down anywhere. It's sort of a proposed amount, so there could be more than that. I did contact the officers and I raised various queries with them, and they very kindly answered, gave me lots of good answers, but I'm still concerned about enforcement, and we know that enforcement is difficult. The conditions have got to be enforced, and this is going to be a problem if it goes ahead. So there's lots of unknowns, and there's lots of questions about wildlife, noise, hours of work, and on that basis, I'm not happy to agree this officer's recommendations. However, Chairman, if members are mindful of agreeing it, I would like to propose some amendments to conditions if that comes to. So at the moment, I want to make a proposal to not agree the officer's recommendation on the basis there's no evidence the massive scale of the proposals have been agreed.
Councillor Bamford, you
Seconded.
Councillor Bamford, you can't make a proposal because you can make an amendment, but you can't make a separate proposal because we are debating a proposed and seconded recommendation at the moment. However, we will note what you're saying later on in the debate.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. If you could come back to me, I would like to make an alternative proposal if the first recommendation fails. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to draw members' attention to page 143527, the officer's wording. Whilst the bunds created at the load test area site compound would be fairly high, up to 8 metres, just to put that into context, that's the height of a telegraph pole. I would like one of the officers to confirm the actual acreage of the load test investigation site compound, please. Thank you.
That should be a simple equation for them, Councillor Fleming. We'll put it to them in a minute. Councillor Swain.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, first of all, a few comments. I do think the hours of work need to be looked at. As far as boreholes and so on are concerned, the report does refer to maximum numbers. So I don't know whether one needs to cap the numbers when they've said that. What I would like them to come up with is minimum number. I mean, in this situation, the technicians are likely to go mad and say we want all these boreholes over the place. I wonder whether there's a minimum number that they feel is necessary. Secondly, the load test area seems very large, 100 metres by 200. I don't know if it doesn't seem to be the location where they would put the main plant, the reactors. So I don't know whether that is excessive. As far as period of noise, I assume that most noise is really in the preliminary few months rather than throughout. But as to restoration, I can't see any reason for allowing them 5 years to restore the site once they've finished with their monitoring. I would like to see them do more work in the following areas. On radiological contamination, what they say they've done is merely a desk exercise. This seems to me quite inadequate, particularly as there may be existing information already available. I would like to have more on the impact on aquifers of their drilling and how they would dispose of drilling fluids. I think they need to have a look at reducing noise levels, working to lower thresholds for noise levels. The report and their information relates to noise and vibration. I think it also ought to take into account the impact of infrared, very low volume throbbing effect of the activities. And as far as geological information, I would have thought that already was quite a lot that they could refer to, but they don't seem to have referenced that at all. My last point, there is a reference or comment by the officers that there would be some local employment as a result, even in these first stage activities. I don't know whether that was just a sort of general statement or whether they have any particular kinds of business and activity in mind.
Thank you. Councillor Bassinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to say that I agree with pretty much everything that's gone before, especially Councillor Langham. I understand that this application is for site investigation and not a power station. But let's not be misled or divorced from the fact that this is the cornerstone for a much bigger picture, and the impact starts here. 200 boreholes drilling down to 100 metres deep, 100 metres by 200 metre low testing area, about 10 metres deep, I think it says. Noise pollution of up to 75 dB. 75 decibels is very, very noisy indeed. Light pollution. Is it 78? There you go, even more. Light pollution, working from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m, 6 days a week, especially in the winter. This site will have to be floodlit, so there will be light pollution. Wastewater pollution. There'll be extra lorries carrying massive drilling equipment, building materials, aggregate, coupled with the workers' cars, will create huge increase on traffic and using the existing infrastructure. So all this lovely new roads, already the traffic here is terrible. There'll be massive negative impact on the wildlife, marine life, and it will impact on our heritage sites and sites of conservation. It will have a negative visual impact on the landscape. These mounds are huge. It will also have a negative impact on the people that live here and the surrounding areas. The LDP says, in principle, the council will support a power station, but it doesn't say, in principle, it will support a power station 20 times the size of the existing one. In my opinion, we shouldn't be selling out, and we shouldn't sell out for a bag of beans with a 106 agreement stamped on it. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Skeens, as the final speaker.
Hi. Well, OK, I asked the question, why Bradwell B, and arguments in favour of this application and the associated borehole drilling for a new power station are simply this: temporary disruption in return for new jobs, a boost to the local economy, and a partial answer to the UK's desperate need for efficient power sources to close the energy gap, and that do not pour out tons of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. This is what this is about. These considerations have recently outweighed my concerns about nuclear safety and local impact because the technology has improved. I'm not a scientist or an expert, but I do write about technology, and I figured with new technology, we could have a safer plant, more powerful than Bradwell A, as I'll call the old one, but on a smaller footprint. Something that, in fact, turns out to be totally possible. So what fresh hell is the current form of this Bradwell B monstrosity with all the boreholes and other planning issues it creates? Is something of this scale needed at all? That is the fundamental planning question that is pertinent to this application. Do we need something on this scale, as Councillor Bamford has asked? Shouldn't new technology require less space, not more, in order to do the same thing? If you look at your phone, watch how it's dropped from being a Motorola brick by your ear in the 80s, and now it does so much more and is so much smaller. It is the nature of technological advance for technologies to become more compact. So what on earth is going on here? Now, I think I'm right in saying that Bradwell A's 2 reactors put out 300 megawatts at their peak in '68. Bradwell B requires 10 times the space to put out 6 times the power. That's 10 times the space, including 4 massive buildings, each 200-foot high, far higher than the original Bradwell reactors. How is that an advance in technology? Bradwell B is expected to cost 20 billion. But when nobody really knows, but if Hinkley's anything to go by, it's going to be more. Is there an alternative? The answer is yes. Rolls-Royce are among a number of leading technology companies creating small modular reactors costing about 2 billion, though the figures aren't clear yet, each. And they put out 450 megawatts. That's 100 megawatts more than Bradwell A's 2 reactors at their peak, as I understand it. Now, that is technological progress, and all on a building footprint of 1.5 acres set in a 10-acre site, not the 450 acres that Bradwell B seems to be requiring. It seems that 5 of them we could put out the same power or more than Bradwell B for half the expected cost and requiring 1/5 of the land. Have you had a look? Have you seen them? I'm just going to show you now a quick picture of the of what I'm talking about. I'm hoping you can see that. Can you see that? Okay, well, I'll show it to you later if you can't, but here's my point. The point is simply this, that's a maximum height of 16 meters. That's 53 feet, not 200 feet times 4, and with a 60-year working life. So here's the thing. They would be British designed, British built, and British owned. And indeed, would we need 5 on this site? 1 would put out more power than Bradwell A did, and we could supply Chelmsford, Colchester and Southend and everything in between, which of course is the Malden district. Is that not a no-brainer? Isn't soon the government going to wake up and say, actually, come on, we've got to do something about this. This current configuration makes no sense to me at all, and therefore all these boreholes are not needed, not yet. This potential white elephant, this potential white mammoth needs further investigation. So I think I've been accurate in what I'm saying. I'm open to persuasion, but I think we need to pause and look at this more carefully and check the alternatives before we devastate this area. Seriously, we need to pause. Voting against this will, in my view, give us that pause.
Thank you. Councillor Shaughnessy, I apologise. I appear to have thought you'd spoken, but I must have missed you. Councillor Shaughnessy. Have you given up on me? Councillor Shaughnessy.
Sorry, Chairman, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, I apologise. I thought you'd spoken.
Yes, I did hear you. Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate that. I've several points. I've agreed with everything everyone has said so far. Everyone's been very eloquent and covered lots of ground, which is amazing. I would just like to say that the government has not agreed Bradwell at the moment. It is still only a potential site, which the letter from the CEO that Mr. Johnson read out also pointed out. And the government energy white paper is still pending, not least of which I don't suppose because the government have had, rather a lot on their mind with the pandemic at the moment. So that white paper has not materialised yet. We are awaiting it. So why the haste here? Really, why the haste? And like Councillor Bassinger, I don't think that these groundworks, which as everyone has said, will be hugely devastating, can be divorced from the whole build. And I would just like to furnish councillors with a few facts, which may well come out in the white paper, at least some of them. Nuclear energy is twice the price of that in wholesale energy markets.
Councillor Mrs. Shaughnessy, I don't think that this is really relevant to our Debate.
Well, if
So
I may,
if you can just
if I may,
concentrate.
Chairman, I think the build or CGN and China, you know, these groundworks won't decide whether it goes ahead or not, just how it will go ahead. And like Councillor Basinger, I can't divorce the things, but I would just like to say a few things about nuclear energy. I think it will, you know, decide whether this whole thing goes ahead or not. Because UK energy consumption has fallen by 24% since 2005, despite the population growth of 10%.
Can you try and make your comments on this planning application and not a nuclear power station or the nuclear power energy that the national...
Let the lady speak.
I appreciate what you're saying, Chairman, but I do think lots of things are important. I do have a question for the officers. Someone has already mentioned the Essex Wildlife Trust and the RSPB have spoken against this. And although these are wildlife and ornithology experts, why was only the view of the National Trust taken forward, who are not experts in this?
That's a good question.
Thank you.
Did you want to say anything else?
Well, I have got some more facts here, if councillors have time.
I think we'll pass on the facts for the moment, because I want to come back to the officers on Councillor Lagan's detailed paragraph by paragraph and see whether they have managed to formulate some answer in response to Councillor Lagan's comments. I think Councillor Lagan probably covered nearly every issue, but there were one or two other issues, Devon, that came up. So would you like to try and answer all these questions?
Thank you, Chairman. I think I made a note of the majority of the paragraphs, but it's probably best if I take it sort of on a subject by subject, so such noise character, so we can address it all that way rather than paragraph by paragraph. And hopefully if I missed anything, members will let me know.
Thank you.
In terms of the character and appearance of the area, the works are temporary in nature, and it is conditioned that the site will be restored to its current condition once the works have been taken place. So any visual harm is considered to be temporary, given the extent of the site as well, and the fact that the material that will be stored will be natural materials. It's officers' view that the long-term harm wouldn't be significant and detrimental. In terms of the heritage and the impacts on the World War II hangars, whilst there would be, again, some temporary harm in terms of visual impacts on them, it's not a structural concern. It won't affect the actual integrity of the structures themselves. It's just going to be a visual impact, and again, that is temporary. And we've proposed conditions that will ensure that the site is put back to its former condition, and that any impacts on those hangars will be addressed over time. So again, for those reasons, we didn't consider that the harm would be demonstrable over the long term. In terms of, sorry, just ticking them off as I go. I think Councillor Lagan mentioned about there not being a net biodiversity gain. So a lot of my responses are going to be to do with the fact that the works are not permanent. As the site will return to its former state, it's considered that it should go back to its current biological and ecological state as well. What would happen as part of any future application of the power station, we'd expect to see a landscape and ecological strategy as part of that, and so that would be something that needed to come forward as part of the wider proposal, rather than these works at the moment, but because these are temporary, it wouldn't be reasonable for us to require them to implement net biodiversity gain at the moment, and the site should refer back to its current biodiversity value once the works are complete. Residential amenity. The impacts, particularly on noise and light, have been addressed within the officer's report in relation to different properties within the site. Whilst it's noted that there are sensitive areas within the site where noise exceed, I think one of the references that councillors are referred to are the 78 decibels. This is based on a worst case scenario. So with mitigation measures imposed, which are both in relation to the time works can be carried out and where they can be carried out, it's likely that the noise won't exceed the threshold. This, as I said earlier, this is an approach that we adopted as part of the 2017 permission as well. So we wouldn't be doing anything that we haven't done before or found reasonably to do so previously. Also, in relation to the ecological receptors, I think the closest one is 950 metres away. So whilst on the plans it may look as though they're very close, it's 950 metres is quite a distance, and that there will be monitoring taking place during the works at those sensitive sites. There's also conditions proposed that where they're in the sensitive areas, works can only occur during 1 hour for certain hours of the day. So bear with me 1 second. I think it's condition, I'll find it now, but yeah, so one of the conditions prevent any works taking place for excessive periods near the most sensitive residential receptors. Where was we? Did have another point to make on that in relation to noise. Oh, and also in the hours of use, the hours of work. So there's conditions that prevent works taking place during certain months of the year. Also, whilst the hours in general are fairly wide, as I've just said, if there's particular concerns in relation to particularly sensitive areas, then the hours have been reduced in those areas to make sure that there are no detrimental impacts on either ecological receptors or residential receptors. Just probably worth mentioning on that as well that environmental health have been consulted and are happy with those findings. That probably brings me on to the points in relation to light. So the lighting proposed within the application site are only limited to the compound areas, and there's a condition that both Natural England and the ecology consultant have been consulted on that ensures that they won't create unsuitable and unnecessary light pollution within the surrounding area, but there's no need for any other extensive flood lighting or anything out further on the peninsula in relation to the boreholes or any works taking place there. The next point I picked up was in relation to employment. So the report acknowledges that there would be 30 people employed at the site, which it does acknowledge that they probably, due to the that they would probably come in from the outside of the site just because of the specific the area due to the specific skill set that they require. But there will be some economical benefits to the local area in terms of them being within the site, perhaps through seeking accommodation and things like that through the time. But we do notice that is something of limited weight, but it is something to be considered. I think there were some points mentioned in relation to flood risk. So 26% of the boreholes will be in flood zone 3, but given their nature, so I consider that they'll create an increase in flood risk or pose sort of any human risks in relation to flood risk. There is a suitable management plan put in place, which also includes responding to the Environment Agency's flood risk warnings, and there's evacuation procedure. The load test area and the other compound area are in flood zone 1. And then the only part of the load test area which is within flood zone 3 is the spoil storage area. But given the size of the floodplain as a whole and the limited size of that area, it's not thought that would increase flood risk elsewhere. And then I think, forgive me, I forget which member asked, but there was somebody asked for the area of the excavation for the load test. So the main excavation in the centre would be 23.6 hectares in area. So that's the 200 by 100 metres. I think that covers everything, but if I've missed anybody's points, please do let me know.
I think Devon, there was an issue about heritage, wasn't there?
Yeah, so that was what I was referring to in relation to the hangars, the World War II hangars.
And the watchtower?
Yeah, so the World War II hangars are actually in closer proximity than the control tower in relation to the development. So given that we found that there's not substantial harm in relation to the hangars, it's not considered that any of the other designated sites would be impacted on in any greater sense.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lagan, I see you, Mrs. Shaughnessy.
Thank you.
Councillor Lagan, I think Devon has tried to cover most of your issues, but is there anything that you don't think she's covered?
Well, firstly, Chair, thanks, Devon, for the responses. I'm still concerned that the responses are in line with the detail in the report, and the points that I raised earlier on I still stand by, because we talk about the word should, we talk about lighting, we've got no Lux reports. You know, we talk about it's been done before, but that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be looked at differently. 30 people not at the site, the flood risk. We're acknowledging things in the report that we say that we won't allow within our policies, and therefore I still stand by the questions that I have, although I appreciate the officer's answers.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Shaughnessy, you want to come back on something?
Chairman, my question wasn't answered by Devon, I'm afraid.
What was the question again?
I'll repeat it for her. The Essex Wildlife Trust and the RSPB have objected to this application. And although these are wildlife and ornithology experts, why was only the view of the National Trust taken forward, who are not the experts? Because obviously, you know, the ecology of this area will be severely, messed about with. Thank you, Devon.
Apologies, Councillor. As soon as I saw you, I thought, oh, I missed that one. So it's not that we've not taken into consideration the view of Essex Wildlife Trust or the RSPB, but Natural England are the statutory consultee for these matters, and they have provided a response that quite a lengthy response in relation to the application, and they don't raise any concerns. So as the statutory consultee, in this instance, this is a view that we've taken. We have taken the other views on board and addressed them within the report, but yeah, as I say, the Natural England as a statutory consultee is the.
Okay, thank you, Devon. But I still, you know, the RSPB, for instance, has made vast, recommendations here, and I thought they should have had more prominence. But thank you for your answer, and thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Nunn, you want to come back on heritage?
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, Devon. I know this will probably be seen as a very narrow point, but to me it's an important one, and not just me, but to many other people. There's an odd notion here in terms of heritage conservation. To say that there won't be any damage is just not true. The enclosure and the boreholes based on that plan seem to be on and going through part of the runway and perimeter track. So how can that be temporary, and how can that damage be repaired and reinstated with all of that work taking place? It will prevent visitors to this important historic site for a good 5 years. And actually, in 5 years' time, probably all of the RAF veterans that we have left will be dead.
Good point.
Devon?
Thank you. So in terms of, we don't envision there being any structural impacts on the existing heritage assets. In terms of anything to do with archaeology or heritage in that sense, there's a written scheme of investigation that's been conditioned or proposed to be conditioned, so that if anything is found within the site during those works, then that could be dealt with appropriately. But I think we're subject to the conditions that we're satisfied that there wouldn't be sort of long-term harm other than the visual impacts that will occur while the works are taking place to the heritage assets.
Councillor Bell, you've got one on harm?
I have, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I mean, with respect, what I'm hearing here is harm doesn't count as harm if it's only temporary. And I entirely disagree with that. Furthermore, some of these things can't be got back. Once a species has been, killed off, is gone, it's gone. You can't get that back. It's not just temporary. And Councillor Mayes mentioned the seismic impact briefly. The effect of vibration on these heritage assets, of which Councillor Nunn has spoken, could be terminal, really. And in the amount of vibration that is going to be caused by these boreholes, we cannot afford to underestimate the harm, permanent harm, that will be caused by that. Harm is harm, whether it's temporary or permanent. I'm sorry. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Right, now that concludes all the speakers. And so I'm aware of Councillor Bamford wishing perhaps to suggest something else, but for the moment I shall move forward with the vote on the recommendation and the of approval and with the conditions. Members be aware of the earlier debate. So Tara, would you take the roll, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Members, as before, if you could indicate for, against or abstain, please, starting with Councillor Bamford. Councillor Bamford.
I'm against.
Thank you. Councillor Bassinger.
Against.
Councillor Miss Beale.
Against.
Councillor Bell.
Against.
Councillor Boyce.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Fleming.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Fluker.
Chairman, I'm excluded from voting under Rule 4.9 of the remote meeting protocol. So I'm not doing either of those. I'm just excluding. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Harker. Councillor Harker. Councillor Hurd.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Helm. Councillor Helm. Councillor Hull.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Against.
Councillor Lagan.
Against.
Councillor Mays.
Against.
Councillor Morley.
Against.
Councillor Morris.
Definitely against.
Councillor Nunn.
Against.
Councillor Shaughnessy.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
Against.
Schemes.
Against.
Stamp.
Against, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Stilts.
Against.
Swain.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
Abstain.
Councillor Miss White.
Against.
Tara, it's Councillor Helmy. I don't know if you got my against or not.
No, I've got that now. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
And I'm just going to check Councillor Harker again if he's present, Chairman. Just going to make sure he's not on the list. Bear with me a moment. No, I think he must have dropped out. So the result of that...
Councillor Harker said earlier that he had a prejudicial interest, didn't he? Pecuniary interest, so he was leaving.
Yes, thank you, Matt. Chairman, the result of that vote is nobody's for, 22 against and 2 abstentions.
Thank you, Tara. That motion is therefore lost. I now need, and I'm sure I'm going to get plenty, reasons for refusal. And I think Mr. Lee might be able to help on this occasion.
Chairman, Chairman, I do have some reasons. I would like to put those to Mr. Lee for his comment.
Please do, Councillor Bamford.
So the reason against would be that there is no evidence the massive scale of the proposals have been agreed by government, making it necessary to undertake extensive groundwork investigations, insufficient information and concerns on the effects of wildlife and heritage sites. So if I may ask Matt.
Thank you.
That, Elaine.
Through you, Chairman. Obviously, I'd split that into 3 various reasons for refusal, which the first one relates really to the principle of the nuclear power station. This application isn't for that. It is for the groundworks, and these are necessarily for the consideration at the DCO process. So I would advise against that as a reason for refusal, because it doesn't really talk to this application. It talks to the future.
Can I just clarify that though, Matt, because the reason why they're having to do the extensive groundworks are purely because of the scale of the proposal. So it is relevant.
And I understand what Councillor Bamford's coming from, but that relates to whether or not there is a need for a nuclear power station of this scale. That's what these works are required to facilitate. And to a certain extent, it's putting the cart before the horse. And my professional opinion is such a reason for refusal would be very dangerous.
What about the other 2?
I'll move on to those. Obviously, officers do not consider there's an impact on the ecology, especially taking into account the Environment Agency's and the Natural England's responses. But obviously, members, that's within their gift. And obviously, officers have raised or do not consider there's demonstrable harm, taking into account the temporary nature of the development on the historic assets. But once again, obviously, if members don't agree with that, that's within their gift.
Okay, thank you. That is 2 viable reasons. Members, I've had a suggestion which I've lost now. One of the reasons could be a detrimental. Detrimental impact on the character and landscape of the area. Councillor Fleming suggests. Would that be a viable one, Mr. Lee?
Once again, obviously, concerns with that is relation to the fact this is a temporary development, that it in theory is going to be returned back to the state it was if the new nuclear power station doesn't come forward. And therefore, members need to consider how much harm is actually from this application in relation to the character and appearance of the area. Thank you, Chairman.
Noise impact. Was that covered, Mr. Lee?
Thank you, Chairman. I know members raised this, and I know Ms. Herner, sorry, not Ms. Lawson. Dealt with this, I think, quite eloquently during the debate. While this is a worst case scenario, there are requirements we can be conditioned that are suggested that would mitigate the harm and bring it down to the numbers required to be acceptable. Therefore, I'd have concerns with a reason refusal on noise and disturbance because of the fact that a condition could overcome those in officers' opinion.
Okay, Councillor Skeens, would you like to suggest something?
Well, yes, I mean...
nothing to do with redesigning nuclear power stations.
Well, it's slightly related because the whole point here is that they need these boreholes for a massive development that is unnecessary. Now, we have agreed as a council in principle with a nuclear power station. We have not agreed in principle with a massive power station, and therefore we don't need all these boreholes. And in order to make this speculative, disruptive drilling of 200 boreholes in order to try and support the production of technology that is already outdated strikes me as madness. So I would say that it's definitely relevant. The science.
So it's a sort of premature application without knowing what size, but we do know what size they want to put in.
We know what size they want to put in, and we're saying that what I'm saying is that they don't need that size because I've already demonstrated that they don't need that size.
To you, Chairman, my advice is that is something for the DCO and not for the local authority, and that should not form a reason for refusal. I would think it'd be a very dangerous direction to take ourselves in.
I think members, as I advised before, when you're making a recommendation of refusal of an application, it's best to keep the reasons for refusal as few as possible, unless you have got sound planning reasons to put them in as reasons for refusal. We've got at the moment, I suspect, 2 subjective reasons, which I'm quite happy to move forward to a final vote.
Can I ask a question, please, Chair?
Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, whoever that was.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lagan. I just
Councillor Lagan, yes, I've got you down to speak.
The reason for refusal, bulk and scale, because Mr. Lee's always talking to us about bulk and scale of different applications and how to some of the valid reasons to not accept them. So surely, with members 22 against this proposal, Matt, clearly on the bulk and scale, that could be a valid reason for refusal.
Yeah, well, I suspect that it's a bulk and scale is only on the buns, and that's only temporary. But Mr. Lee,
Chairman, you've taken the words out of my mouth.
I'm sorry.
I think no, that's not a problem. But yeah, it's I would have concerns about the ability to argue that the buns in their site and the views that are available, etc., and the temporary nature that would be a defendable reason for refusal. Thank you.
Yeah. What is the, and you through the chair? We're coming up with many reasons why we can't. But how about supporting the members in decision makings with your professional opinion, with steering us on what we can and is a defendable reason? If bulk and scale not just necessarily.
Well, Councillor Lagan, Mr. Lee, officers have a problem when they've given their professional opinion and members have overturned it. Mr. Lee is always very helpful. We have got 2 reasons for refusal that Mr. Lee is content with. I won't say he's happy with them, but he is content with them. Now, sure. I've got
opinion in the doubt. I was just asking for his support from a professional aspect.
Chairman, I can't sort of pop in very quick. Can I actually just ask a question? It's
I've got Councillor Nunn has been wishing to speak before you, Councillor Stamp, if you don't mind. Councillor Nunn.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So 5 years on the wildlife heritage character and landscape of the area, which is felt by this council to be irreversible.
Okay. Mr. Lee, is that a subjective one?
To a certain extent, my advice still stands in relation to this point. 5 years in the lifetime of a development, in the long term, when we look at planning, that goes back to 1947 now. 5 years is not a long-term harm. There's a level of subjectivity, and I think, as I've explained, I think there's some leaning, obviously maybe more towards disturbance to birds in the shorter term. But things such as the impact on the character, I don't think of 5 years would be, in the big picture, seen as a defendable reason for refusal. That's my professional opinion.
By this council,
Tara's telling me off. We should be using the chat to wish to speak. Councillor Nunn, you can say something, and then I'm going to Councillor Thompson.
I'm just picking up on what Mr. Lee said. Really, you know, that was the second part of my proposal was that this council feels is irreversible.
Yep, exactly.
Right. I think we can probably go with that. Councillor Thompson.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. I'm actually going to say to members, can I suggest, as the Chairman already has and Mr. Lee already has, pick your battles, stick to subjective reasons that we can justify, because if we go against our professional advice, we're on hiding to nothing. And Mr. Lee is the one, as are other of our professional officers, he's the ones with the degrees and the masters. And to be honest, I'm very inclined to accept that if he says that a reason isn't going to stand up, that I believe it really isn't going to stand up. So please, members, pick your battles. It's important that we win them and not have a scattergun approach with every reason we can think of. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Morris, you want a question? Councillor Morris.
Yeah, I'm just getting the old chat function thing trying to work. Yeah, I'll just suggest that Mr. Lee has heard the full debate. He knows pretty much everything that's been said. And can we not leave it to him to pick out the best reason for refusal?
We have already decided that there are two subjective reasons that Mr. Lee is comfortable with, or content with, if not comfortable. So we'll move on. I think that's all speakers. We'll move on then to take the motion for...
I think Councillor Swain has also been for quite a while.
Councillor Stamp, did you want to speak?
I've been trying to speak. I did say I had issues with technology at the beginning of the meeting, Chairman. Can I just ask you to reiterate the decisions or the reasons for refusal, what members, because like I said, I've got problems with technology. So what is on the table? What is on the table, Chairman?
Yeah, we were going to do that. And now I've also got somebody else that wants to say something.
Well, no, because depending on what's on the table, it depending on if I say something, Chairman. Is that okay?
Yeah, okay. Tara, can you help us with the two reasons that we've got, because they've gone under my radar at the moment?
Mine too.
Or Mr.
Chairman,
Lee.
do you want me to pick it up?
Please.
My understanding, members, was that the first one was relation to noise and disturbance on ecology matters. Obviously, officers will make the reasons refusal if the application is refused a little bit more robust, but that would be the main thrust. Yeah. And then a similar one in relation to the historic environment. I know there was other ones in relation to noise and disturbance just generally, which I wouldn't encourage members look at. Another one about impact on the area, bulk or anything along those lines, which once again I would not encourage. And obviously there was one that just a little bit more recently about that the council doesn't think that the site can be returned to its former appearance, but I've got concerns that because obviously we've got conditions that impose it be required. If you'd need to have some sort of assessment of why you felt that, and obviously members don't have that in front of them. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, can I just ask? Can I ask now, after listening to that?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Can Mr. Lee not try and help us support by actually what Councillor Nunn has been saying very eloquently all along, is protecting our heritage and our assets? Surely that is defensible in a court of appeal when we have got a duty of care, and Councillor Nunn very eloquently said about the history. If you're going to dig boreholes, you're going to change the whole. Say in 100 years' time, somebody wants to do some ecology to find out some archaeological information, you've disturbed it. And also the other assets, Chairman. I'm not going to bang over it again, but can we not have something about protecting our heritage, please, Mr. Lee?
Through you, Chairman. That was the second one that I just said.
Yeah.
Ecology and archaeology.
Mr. Lee, it was very wishy-washy, and I just wanted to put some meat on the bones. I didn't get it all in quite detail.
I wouldn't recommend that we came up with the exact wording right now. As always, I'd recommend we come up with the objection, and then that's delegated to officers to come up with the exact wording. But it would be on the relation to the harm of the archaeological assets, which obviously have a finite life.
That's brilliant. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. Tara, are you happy with that? There's two reasons around those two issues that the officers will put the wording together.
Chairman, Councillor Swain's had his hand up for a very long time. He's been very patient. I think people have missed him because he's been at the top of the list for a long time, and everyone else has been coming in after him.
Councillor Swain, I apologise. Councillor Swain.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I had a wording for the refusal. In principle, I think we ought to include that there is a lack of technical information. I was going to say, and it overlaps perhaps to some extent what has been said, inadequate information about the scale and nature of proposed investigative operations and their impact, and a need for tighter restrictions on operations. I don't know if that is specific enough for Mr. Lee.
I think Mr. Lee has advised on this that this sort of thing can be done by conditions in mitigating. But Mr. Lee, what's your comments on Councillor Swain's?
Through you, Chairman, I'm unclear on what the lack of information is, because I think officers are quite comfortable with the information we have with us at this time to be able to assess the application. If members weren't happy with certain restrictions that have been suggested, as just said by the chairman, that would be a case of additional conditions or variances to the conditions that we've suggested rather than a reason for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Tara.
Yes, Chairman.
Have you got the an idea for the wording of these
Chairman.
two reasons for refusal? Would you like to read them out for members?
Yeah, Chairman, as Matt Lee mentioned, the first in relation to noise and disturbance on ecology matters, the second in relation to historic environment, but also making mention to archaeology and the heritage assets.
Thank you. And would we add that the officers will formulate the wording for this in consultation with myself, perhaps, and anybody like to suggest anybody else? No? All right, in consultation. Are members happy with that?
Yeah, if you need it.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll put the motion to refuse with the two conditions for refusal, subject to the wording being checked in consultation with myself. Is that correct, Tara?
Yes, Chairman.
Right. Okay. Will you call the roll, please?
Yeah, of course, Chairman. So members, as before, if you could just indicate if you're for, against or abstaining, starting with Councillor Bamford, please. Thank you.
For.
For.
Councillor Miss Beale.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Boyce.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
For.
Stunning.
Hi, Tara. Councillor Thompson's just raised, I lost my connection very briefly. Am I able to vote?
No.
My understanding is if it's very briefly, yes. But if it's, my understanding the legislation does allow for dropping out of internet. But if it was more than anything than that, then it would be no. So, okay,
so Matt, could you define very briefly then? I don't know how long it was.
The legislation allows literally for your internet to drop out and to come back, sort of an instant. If you missed any of the debate, the law would still kick in that you shouldn't vote.
I shouldn't
which
vote.
Overrides, that overrides.
Councillor Thompson, did you miss much of the debate?
Sorry, Chairman. No, I didn't miss any. I was just trying to help out with a couple of people who were mentioning they missed missed bits, and all I want to do is protect the council in its decision. I don't want to interfere with anyone's right to vote, just to make absolutely sure we don't do the wrong thing and end up challenged.
So you're happy to vote?
I'm happy to vote. I was just raising the issue, just in case. I'll go for the minute.
Yeah, my advice would be, if you did miss bits, to quote Councillor Thompson, would be you don't vote because you weren't available. It allows for to stop and to re-enter, but if you have missed any of the debate, and I literally mean any of it, I would advise you don't vote, because that would be challengeable.
Okay, so I missed a couple of minutes switching to a mobile router when our connection failed, so I won't vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fluker.
He said that he's not voting, didn't he?
That's right. Yes, sorry. Yeah. Councillor Harker.
I think he's left. Did you say?
Yes. Apologies. I'm going through the list. Sorry, Chairman. Councillor Hurd.
Yes, I'm for refusal on the noise and disturbance and vehicles entering and exiting the site as well, which I was trying to get.
We haven't got that. We're not voting on that, Councillor
Hurd.
Right. Okay. Yes or no?
I support refusal.
For. Carry on, Tara.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Helm.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hull. Councillor Hull.
For.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, got you. Thank you very much. Councillor Jarvis.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Lagan.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mays.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Morley. He's left the meeting, hasn't he? Sorry. Councillor Morris.
Definitely for.
Thank you very much. Councillor Nunn.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Shaughnessy.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
For.
Keynes.
Sorry, for.
Thank you. Councillor Stamp.
For, Tara.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stilts.
For.
Councillor Swain.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
Abstain.
And Councillor Miss White.
For.
Results of that vote is 24, nobody against and 2 abstentions.
Thank you, Tara. That motion is therefore carried for refusal with the 2 conditions as outlined. I now move on to agenda item 7, business by reason of special circumstances considered by the chairman to be urgent. I have none. I therefore close the meeting at 16:22.